Well, councillors, I can see that we have a quorum, and so I might begin the meeting. I'll begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and paying my respects to their elders, both past and present. Can I just get an indication from councillors as to whether everybody can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Can I ask whether there are any apologies from councillors tonight? No apologies. Notice of webcasting for the benefit of the councillors and anybody else watching on YouTube. These proceedings are recorded, and we remind everyone at the beginning of each meeting about the legal ramifications of comments they make in the public domain. Disclosures of interest, councillors. Are there any disclosures of interest tonight? No disclosures? Excellent. I'll ask everyone to please join in a moment of quiet contemplation. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to mayoral minutes. There is one mayoral minute tonight, which is in relation to Anzac Day. It's a simple thank you and acknowledgement to the bugle players and the local businesses who participated in having the last post played at dawn on Saturday. I don't think there's any need for explanation or debate. So if there's no one who wishes to speak against it, I'll put that. All those in favour, please raise your hands. I have in favour councillors Hesse, Stamoulis, Steer, Lockie, McKenna, Kiat, De Cruz, Drury, Rossetti, Macri, York, and I can't see councillor Passis, but I'm going to presume that she's in support as well.
No, I can't. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, councillor Passis.
Well, I can't see anything, so I can't put my hand up. There's nothing there.
The resolution is to, I'll just ask the minute takers to return it to the screen so that I can read it to councillor Passis. That council, if you could just, thank you very much. That council thank the publicans from the Royal Hotel Leichhardt, the Hotel in Stanmore and the Unity Hall Hotel in Balmain, free Anzac Day ceremonies on the 25th of April. The three buglers who played outside those pubs, and the Balmain Roselaw sub-branch of the RSL New South Wales and Leichhardt Celebrity Bass Band for their assistance with the three improvised Anzac Day ceremonies on the 25th of April. So, councillor Passis, are you in support of that?
I have not. It's got yes, yes.
Okay, that's unanimous. That has been carried. We'll now move on to the items listed on the business papers. The first is delegation of operational traffic matters. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to raise a question about that? No?
Yes. Yeah. Hello? Yes, I do.
Yes, councillor Stamoulis.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I have some concerns with this. I think one thing that's been quite noticeable over the term of this council is there seems to be a slow creep of delegation, and it's becoming noticeable to our community. And questions are being asked why the Inner West is doing this. And also the other issue is how consistent is our practice of increased delegation with what other councils might be doing. So I think that's the important question that we need to raise. I think any heavy centralisation of decision making would probably alarm the people of the Inner West who prefer wider decision making, and in fact they often prefer it in the hands of their then of course I think when we load up a particular position or office with increased decision making, there are the OHAS issues. We certainly express a lot of concern about the workload of council staff. We certainly express a lot of concern about the workload of councillors. And I noticed that we're continually pouring additional delegations onto the CEO. And we also need to take account of how we do that. And we also have to look at OHAS issues for our CEO. And we need to ask ourselves, are we delegating too much to that position? Is it consistent with what's being done with other CEOs and GMs? And we also need to think about our duty of care to the CEO. So I'm going to put forward an alternative motion that council report back on its delegations to ensure that these are consistent with other councils and also with regard to the LGA Act and OHAS. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for that, councillor. So I will move the adoption of the officer's recommendation. I'll move that, and I'll just go to the officers first of all for an explanation to the background and what's occurred so far. I'll put that to the Chief Executive.
Thanks. Kathy might be able to fill in the detail, but essentially this is a COVID-19 related matter. Certainly at this stage, that the operational efficiency that's provided has meant that we have been able to deal with these issues, which are important for individuals, but in the greater scheme of things are probably much smaller scale matters. And the delegations are exercised by the relevant senior traffic officer. Kathy might want to add more.
I might just go to the chair of the traffic committee, Councillor Macri, who was also consulted about the process. Councillor Macri, did you wish to explain any of the background?
Yes, thanks, Chair. We've been getting snowed under with a lot of minor things at the traffic committee, and what it does, it holds up the efficiency and holds people up. Things that you see listed there, like minor street openings and minor footpath openings, all have to come back and actually looked at by the actual council staff, and then they have to come up to council. And there's a lag between when it can come back, gets on the agenda of the traffic committee, and then there's another 2 to 3 week lag to get on the actual council agenda. And that's just holding people up. And a lot of those things are minor things. And we are operating in difficult times at the moment with COVID. And I'm happy to give it a go for 12 months. And I don't expect things to be going to the CEO for a review. I think they're fairly straightforward things. I mean, I can't see any problem in giving this a go. And I think it might speed up service to the residents. That's why I'll be supporting it.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Stamoulis, I note that the motion as proposed in the business papers is simply just a note about a decision that I've made under delegation in consultation with the chair of the traffic committee and at the recommendation of the council officers. So I'm happy to incorporate your suggestion as an amendment, because I don't think our delegations are out of line with other councils. So I'm happy to incorporate that, but as a standalone motion, it would be out of order. So you're happy for me just to incorporate that as an extra point, Councillor Stamoulis?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'll put that. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Stamoulis. All those in favour? Is there anyone against? I declare that carried unanimously. Next item, Leichhardt Park Plan of Management. Councillors, I will move the officer's recommendation, and I think all councillors are well aware of the detailed planning that has gone into the development of this plan of management, and also the significant delays that have occurred due to state government red tape, to be blunt. The process that we've had to go through, in which the Crown lands within the LGA were all reviewed, and we had to rush off to the state government to give them a report on it, and then it sat with them doing nothing for the best part of the year, which has delayed this project. Councillors will also be aware that there is very strong support from the sporting community for the resurfacing of Leichhardt Park, Leichhardt number 2, to benefit all community sports, but particularly I think we'll all recall the young women who attended the council meeting on behalf of Leichhardt Saints and who took a particular liking to Councillor Passis, as I recall, during the debate, and who were advocating for women and girls to have access to the same level of sports facilities that boys and men do. And we know that in order to achieve that, we are going to have to make sure that we invest in increasing the capacity of the grounds that we do have, because we're not going to get large swathes of new public open space. So I'm very pleased that this is finally coming to fruition and we can get on with the job of making sure that there's a terrific new playing facility down there for Leichhardt Saints and other clubs in the months to come. And in addition to that, councillors will also be aware that the plan of management contains detailed plans which have been approved unanimously by council for a skate park to finally be built in Leichhardt Park. For councillors who were on the former Leichhardt Council, you will recall that we've been fighting for a very long time to try to make sure there was a new skate facility in our previous local government area. And we've had various iterations throughout Callan Park which have been blocked and opposed by
I
some.
want this meeting stopped.
And then finally,
They're not getting on the meeting. I wanted to speak on this.
I'll just ask if, thank you for that. And we now finally have a situation where we've got unanimous support at the council for a new skate park to be built on the Bay Run, so that when we come out of COVID-19 isolation, kids and young people will have a terrific new public facility to go and make use of. And better yet, one where there is significant visual surveillance to make sure that kids are going to be safe and that they're not getting up to no good. It's the perfect location, in my view, for a youth facility such as this. And so I thank the council officers for their detailed work, and I hope that we can all get behind both of those new sporting and recreational facilities and get them built as quickly as possible. So I will move that way. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor York will second the motion. Councillor York, do you wish to speak to it? Councillor York,
When I take to speak, it says done speaking.
Councillor York will refrain from speaking. Is there anyone who wishes to speak for the motion? Actually, look, I'll just go to Councillor Porteous.
Start video. Where do I press?
I'll just ask the minute taker to silence other councillors who are speaking whilst we're trying to conduct the debate. I'll go to Councillor Porteous.
Thanks, Councillor Byrne. Look, the Greens are supportive of the skate park, and for the skate park to be located in Leichhardt Park does seem to be the best way to go. But there are significant concerns about the way that we've conducted the consultation. I'd say in part the reason for that is that it's happened in a very disjointed way. So there was an early period of consultation back in July last year, which was really very minimal in terms of it was, here's a lot of good ideas and let's put them down on paper and see where
your video is stopped. I keep pressing that, nothing happened.
I'll ask the council minute takers, Mr. Naylor, if you're able just to silence Councillor Porteous while Councillor Passis while Councillor Porteous is speaking, please, notwithstanding the technical issues she's obviously encountering. Councillor Porteous.
Thanks. So in terms of the consultation, that initial period of consultation, there was significant opposition to the skate park, but I think as well there was an acknowledgement that it could go ahead, but possibly the location that was being proposed was not the best. That's now developed into the draft plan of management, where we've got the skate park located where it is next to Le Montage. And again, there's quite significant concern about that location. I really don't think, looking at all the documents, that that has been adequately addressed. I don't know if that's because when the consultation happened, the second stage, we were going through a rather dark period in terms of the bushfires. And so that was quite a difficult period in terms of consultation as well. Having said that, COVID is even worse now. So while this has actually had a long period of consultation, theoretically, the amount of real consultation that's been able to occur is minimal. Particularly what I'm concerned about is consultation in situ on site, because the only times that there has been any in situ consultation for what is a very big and a very important park is 2 Saturdays at the end of June and July last year. And really with the draft plan of management, what you would have wanted is for them to address the issues that were being raised and to go down on site, bring the residents down on site, discuss the issues and see if there's amendments that need to be made to the layout, ways that can address the issues that the residents are rightly concerned about. And basically none of that's happened. And it hasn't really been any opportunity to take seriously proposals for it still to be in the park, but to be in a different part of the park. So we've just taken that as the location, and we've taken the design and that's the end of it. And I just don't think that it's certainly not the quality of consultation.
Councillor, your time has expired. I'll move an extension of time of 1 minute. Okay. Seconded by Councillor Rosidi. All those in favour, against, declare that carried. Please proceed.
Thanks. Any chance we could see the time, by the way, it would help.
So I'll ask Naylor to try to address that. Over to you, Councillor Porteous.
Thanks. So what I'm moving is a foreshadowed motion that council gives in principle support for the location of the skate park in Leichhardt Park. However, notes that many residents have concerns with the current identified location for the skate park, and therefore that the consideration of the draft Leichhardt Park plan of management be deferred and consultation extended until council is able to undertake face-to-face consultation in situ with residents and the skate park users on the proposed site and other sites which may have been nominated, basically to make sure that we get this right, because this is a long-term project and we actually do want to have everybody embracing it and happy with the outcome. And I think that can be achieved, but in the current circumstances, if we move ahead tonight, particularly because we're in COVID, we're not even able to listen to the residents tonight. They can't register to speak. It's not a great scenario. It's very poor in terms of consultation, and I think we can do a lot better. So I move that as a foreshadowed motion.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there a seconder for the foreshadowed?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Do you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, because I was having difficulty reading the maps of the locations, and discussing that location, I think that might clash with the Peace Park, which has been raised with me, which I could find no reference to in this plan of management. I don't know if the officers can comment on that, but I'd like to second this motion as well. Okay, Councillor De Cruz is seconding Councillor Porteous's foreshadowed motion and has put a question to the officers about the proposed Peace Park. I don't think I recall that. No. Is the historical Peace Park on the foreshore of Iron Cove there? I'll just ask you to, what's the question? Where is the Peace Park in the plans of management? I'll put that question to the officers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have to take that one on notice. Perhaps I don't know if the Director of Infrastructure is still with us, as for whether if she's got an idea. She's been more involved in the detailed planning of the skate park thus far. Is she gone? I'll just see if the Director of Infrastructure is there.
Through the chair. The skate park is proposed to be over near La Montage. Peace Park is further to the east, over towards where the children's playground is. So I don't believe that there would be a clash.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor De Cruz, did you wish to speak further?
I was just saying that the Peace Park doesn't seem to be recorded in the plan of management. That's why I'm supporting Councillor Porteous's proposal for a deferment of this issue.
I'll put that question directly to the Director of Infrastructure as to whether there is reference to the Peace Park in the plan of management.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would have to take that on notice, but if there isn't reference to the Peace Park, we could add that in as a last minute change. I don't believe that would be significant.
Councillor De Cruz, what is the Peace Park?
So the Peace Park actually is closer to Lilyfield Bridge. I'm not sure whether that's east or west of La Montage. I would say it was south of La Montage. And I'm not exactly sure where the skate park is, but so a resident has raised with me the concern that there was sandstone signage that has disappeared and a plaque that needs to be reinstalled. And when I was at Canterbury, I visited a peace park. So these are peace parks dedicated after World War II, I think, to that there'd never be war again. So yes, so I'm concerned that the peace park has been lost in this plan of management.
Okay.
And one other, just while we're also making comments about the minor changes, is just the review of the plan refers to the Tempe Reserve, not like our plan of management. Okay. But yeah, there is a peace park and it is located towards Lilyfield Bridge on that foreshore there.
Well, I'm certainly happy to incorporate into the master plan that the identified works at the Peace Park be incorporated, so that can satisfy your concern, Councillor De Cruz. So would you withdraw your seconding of the motion to defer the proposal?
I think the problem is that that this is clashing with the skate park and with the whole plan. So the plan has got a shortcoming that it's not complete and we need to go back to exhibition, is my view.
Well, we're just...
Sorry, Mr Mayor, if I can just clarify that the Peace Park is referenced throughout the plan of management. It's quite clearly documented in the master plan and throughout the plan of management itself, and does not clash with the skate park.
Okay. Councillor De Cruz, your concerns have been satisfied, but you still intend to second the motion regardless?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there anyone who wishes to speak either for Yes, Councillor Stamoulis?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, this area is often a forgotten area, and we don't appreciate some of the strains and stresses of that location. When you look at an area that has La Montage, alcohol and rehabilitation services, LPAC, Leichhardt Oval 1 and 2, a childcare centre, we've got rowing clubs, and we've got the Bay Run in that location. It's a very, very busy and hectic area, and one that we really, really need to consult very closely with the residents if we're about to make any changes. It's a very, very difficult environment and a very intense environment. We forget that it's sort of tucked away, and we forget the intensity of what occurs in that location. I'll certainly be supporting the De Cruz, Porteous De Cruz motion. I think we can improve the consultation, and again, there've been limitations there, and it's fair that with the bushfires and COVID, it's been difficult to have a fully fledged and comprehensive consultation process. But that's not the fault of the residents and the community. I think that's something that we need to now work on, and we need to ensure that we consult our community comprehensively to get the best results. In terms of the skate park itself, I have concerns about that location. Risk and safety are primarily my concern, as well as the concerns of residents. It doesn't have strong support of the residents in that location. What's more, council have seemed to proceeded at 100 miles an hour or 100 kilometres an hour to wrap up this process, to do the designs, to select the location, and even to be ready to have approval of this project to occur prior to the finalisation of a plan of management. I would say that that is contrary to what councillors would normally expect. And I would be surprised that if we approve this plan of management tonight with that skate park, I wouldn't be surprised if some of our residents report this to the Minister, saying that a slightly irregular practice has occurred. Additionally, Mr Mayor, in the interim, for those councillors who may not be aware, City of Sydney are building a new skate park due to be finished at the end of this year, early next year. I spoke to the project officer today, which is right on the boundary of our municipality and located in the northern area of our municipality, exactly where we want to place a facility like this. This new skate park of City of Sydney is within
Councillor,
walking.
your time has expired. Thank you for that. So thank you.
Can I speak, please, Mr Mayor?
Could I have additional time?
I'm not
Well-
moving that way.
Could I speak?
I'll move an extension.
I would like to speak. I cannot get through to this meeting.
No, I can hear you, Councillor Passis, and I've got you and Councillor McKenna next. The Councillor Porteous has moved an extension of time of 1 minute for Councillor Stamoulis.
Well, I
That's
have
seconded by
no,
Councillor Kiat. I'll support it. All those in favour?
I have no
Against?
video.
Declare that carried. Councillor Stamoulis, 1 more minute.
Thank you. So this new skate park is within walking access of Annandale, Lilyfield and parts of Rozelle. It's in direct bus access for Balmain, Birchgrove, and the light rail, of course, will take anyone from Dulwich Hill, Lewisham, Summerhill and Leichhardt straight to it. It might be worth testing that to see if it works for our municipality. That might be a good option for council. And we can make a decision if it doesn't meet that location. It's certainly safe and transport access is there, and it opens, as I say, fairly soon. The other things that I'm noticing in the plan of management is that the protection of green space and foreshore wasn't quite clear to me, even though statements have been made in it. That they, to me, are priority: the protection of green space and foreshore, and also parking management. How we're going to deal with that. I don't think the plan is comprehensive and detailed, so there's many areas there for further consultation. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor McKenna, then Councillor Passis.
Have verified that the DA has been approved for this skate park, hasn't it? We had this at council some time back, and I do understand we've been talking about this extensively since the council was in administration, which is now 3 or 4 years. So this is, as I understand, proceeding, and we're talking about it as if it's only in its infancy. The second, so really, the other second thing I want to say is we're voting here to put this plan of management on public exhibition. That's what we're doing. We're talking about the fact that as if we have not had any consultation. Well, we're having more consultation to come. That's what we're voting on here now. So I think we're all confused about what we're supposed to be doing.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Passis?
Yes, through you to the officers, have we gone out for tender?
I'll put that question to the officers.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have gone out to tender for the skate park because council has previously endorsed this location for a skate park pending the plan of management. So whilst we have gone to tender, we have not awarded that contract, and we will not do so until the plan of management has been adopted.
Thank you for that. Look, I would just like to say I'm not opposed to this, but it seems to be, excuse me, this is not the time that we should be discussing this. And what about WestConnex, Mr. Mayor? Will we put the skate park in and then they come along and dig up again? The same as what happened with the netball courts?
I'm going to take that as a rhetorical question. Councillor
No,
Passis?
no, it's not. Have we contacted WestConnex? Do we know if they're going to start drilling there or not, what they did with the netball courts? Or are you looking to go on Channel 9 again to say how upset you are with the government?
Do you wish to pose that question to me or to the council officers?
No, to you, because we haven't done our homework on such an expensive project.
I understand the question, Councillor. If I could just call you to order. I have not been in personal contact with government officials about that matter recently, but when we met with the head of Sydney Metro, when they withdrew their proposal to take Leichhardt Pool as a dive site for Sydney Metro, we explained unambiguously that we wouldn't cop losing Leichhardt number 2 either, because we need that facility, and we've got plans for a new artificial playing surface, which of course Leichhardt Saints are strongly in support of. And,
well, do we have costings on this?
And it was indicated to me from the head of Sydney Metro that he understood our position and would look elsewhere. So I think that's about as good as guarantee as you can ever get with this state government in regards to infrastructure in the inner west.
Well,
but thank
what
you very
about
much for your
costings? What about costings, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I'll put those questions to the officers, Councillor Passis, because they're the
Thank
appropriate
you.
people to answer.
Thank you.
I'll put that to the Director of Infrastructure in regards to whether the artificial surface field and the other facilities proposed in the master plan have been costed.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. There is already a budget for the skate park of about $1.2 million. So we will be able to complete those works as part of that budget. The synthetic field at Leichhardt number 2 has not been included in the budget to date, but it would be in the order of $2 to $2.5 million to construct that.
So altogether, we're about $3.5 million.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'll call the meeting to order. Are there other councillors who wish to speak to the matter? I'll ask you to just sing out because I can't see hands very easily. Councillor Macri.
Chair, I think the recommendation here is that we're going to go to exhibition, as Councillor McKenna said. People have opportunity to voice their concerns. My concern as a councillor is that we're getting a bit of NIMBYism here, and not in my backyard. We can't even put any exercise equipment in the parks in the old Leichhardt Council. Now we want to block this. After 3 years, what have we done? We've built facilities for Leichhardt residents in Haberfield and Balmain residents in Haberfield. I don't want to go down that path. If this is earmarked to go here, let's hear what the people have to say. Let's get out. Let's not prolong the discussion. If it's not going to happen there, they'll let us know, and that's it. So I think we've got to move forward with the motion as it is. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further contributions? Okay, if not...
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Pastis.
On the previous issue, I could not vote on the amendment that Councillor Stamoulis put up. I cannot see the video and I'm starting to get quite frustrated with how this meeting's been conducted and how it's been pushed forward so fast. We are making serious decisions here tonight.
Yeah, Councillor Passis, we're all finding it challenging dealing with the new environment in which we're meeting remotely. I can tell you, I certainly am as chair. I'm not directly responsible for the quality of the technology, but I guess we're doing our best. So we've heard from you on this matter and we're about to conduct a vote in which your vote will be recorded.
Well, my vote wasn't recorded. I didn't have an opportunity to vote last time.
Right. Well, we lost you, but Councillor Stamoulis' amendment was incorporated into the primary motion.
This is not good enough. These are serious issues that are going to cost a lot of money. We can't just make these decisions ad hoc, especially now.
Councillor Passis, I'll call you to order. So we need to get to the vote. So we've got the primary motion moved by myself and Councillor York to adopt the plan of management. And we've got a foreshadowed motion from Councillor Porteous and Councillor De Cruz to postpone it indefinitely till the end of COVID-19 when we're able to meet. So I'll now go through the councillors. It's like, obviously it's a contested vote, so this might take some time for me to be able to view everyone on the screen. So all those councillors in favour of the Byrne York motion, please raise your hands and keep them raised. I've got Councillor Drury, Councillor Rossetti, Councillor York.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Passis.
You cannot see me when I raise my hand.
Well, you need to sit back a bit further.
I can't see what's going on and I can't see who's raising their hands.
Are you in favour of this motion, Councillor?
No, I'm in favour of Councillor Porteous's motion.
Okay, well, you don't need to raise your hand right now. I'll count you against. I'll have to go back and start at the beginning because I've lost the count now. So I'll ask all councillors who are in support of the primary motion to please raise their hands. I've got councillors Drury, Rossetti, York, Macri, McKenna, Lockie, and myself. Does that mean that Councillor Iskander is not on the line? I'll just seek to confirm that with Mr. Naylor. So that's correct. Okay, thank you for that. So that is a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 votes in favour and 7 votes against. So that is a tie, and I will use my casting vote to vote in favour of that. That has been carried. The master plan will go out on public exhibition. Next item. Tempe.
You did not name the councillors who voted against.
Well, they're the other 7 that they've been recorded in the minutes, and they're the other 7 that I didn't name.
Well,
So,
could you name them? Could you name them?
I'll just ask the minute taker to bring up the record of the vote on the screen so I can recite it for Councillor Passos. Sorry, could the minute takers, oh, sorry, yes. So for the motion were councillors Byrne, Drury, Lockie, Macri, McKenna, Rossetti and York. Against the motion were councillors De Cruz, Hesse, Kiat, Passos, Porteous, Stamoulis and Steer. And I used a casting vote so that the motion was carried. You satisfied with that, Councillor Passos?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, next item, Tempe Reserve. I'm happy to move adoption of the officer's recommendation and refrain from speaking. Is there a seconder for the motion? I've got Councillor Macri. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in support of the motion or move an amendment or oppose it? Just sing out if you're trying to get my attention, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hesse.
I've got Councillor Passos and Councillor Hesse.
Could you tell me what the issue is? The agenda, I cannot get it on or could not get it all up. There's something going on with my computer. I'm using the phone tonight and I cannot see the agenda. What is the Tempe issue?
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Passos. Well, what I'll do is I'll ask council officers to just give a brief verbal update on the gist of the recommendation. Is that satisfactory?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll put that to the Director of Infrastructure, I suppose.
That's more likely to be me, Mr. Mayor. So, councillors, you've got before you a report that seeks endorsement of the Tempe Reserve and Temporary Lands Draft Plan of Management, seeking for it to go to the Minister for Water for seeking owner's consent, then to be placed on public exhibition to be brought back to council for adoption. The master plan and plan of management involves new synthetic fields, 2 soccer fields, a rugby field, an AFL field, new tennis courts, picnic facilities, indoor sports facility, public amenities, new sports fields and futsal courts with a new amenities building and a cafe up on the old Tempe Reserve, Tempe land site, new dog off-leash areas and new cycle paths and pedestrian paths throughout the park.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Passos.
Yes, is this to do with that overpass?
I'll put that question to the officers.
Same site, different matter, Councillor Passos.
Okay then, so and who pays for all this?
I'll put that question to the officers.
Save for 1 synthetic pitch that's currently budgeted for. The remainder of the works are unbudgeted at this time.
They're unbudgeted.
Correct.
And of course, there's a matter in confidential session later on in relation to the funding of this project.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Councillor Hesse.
Thanks, Chair. A question first to the relevant officer through you, if I can, to start. As we know, of course, the Gateway process is underway. Is it anticipated that the Gateway process will in any way infringe on what's proposed here?
I'll put that question to the officers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this stage, no. The plan of management, the current version that you've got before you tonight has accounted for the Gateway project in the master planning process, and we've acknowledged that. And the master plan itself sort of sets out the vision for those returned lands at Tempe and what we would envisage those to look like long term. So it's accounted for that. In terms of construction delays and those kinds of things, inevitably we can't set about undertaking the works within the plan of management until such time as that gateway project that has given us a bit of clear air. With respect to the synthetic pitches, they won't be impacted by the gateway project, but the dog off leash area and the futsal courts component will need to wait for the gateway to be finished.
Okay, thank you for that. Does that answer your questions, Councillor?
It answers my question. If I could now make a comment.
Yes.
Thank you to the officers and the staff for preparing the plan. It's clearly a major work, unbudgeted as it is, and something that I know that is important, particularly for the people of Tempe, of course, but for the people of the area more generally. That said, I cannot support it because it contains one glaring problem, and that is, and I don't have to talk about any details, it's the idea that we as a council will take money for exclusive use in a local government area, in an area which has got not a lot of open space. It basically offends a very deep democratic principle that basically you can't buy privilege. And this is what this plan does. I acknowledge that there is a benefit to the community if you believe that synthetic turf pitches are a good thing, and I recognise there are many in the community who don't, just as I recognise there are many in the community who do. That is not the issue here. It is about the exclusive use or not for any organisation, regardless of their background, over and above other organisations. And I think that is a fundamental problem, because they can afford to tip in the money, wherever that money comes from. That gives them an advantage over every other sports club in the area, indeed every other local user. And I note, for example, that other local schools in the area get federal money up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. That Newington College, for example, gets federal money in the hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government. It is not a level playing field. This is a playing field, and it should be open to all people. And therefore, it is with great regret that I cannot support, I cannot endorse this plan. But that is certainly no offence to the officers or the staff in general. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Further discussion, councillors? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
Hi, Darcy. Got my hand up.
Councillor Kiat.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I will be brief, but just support the comments made by Councillor Hesse. I think that this plan is tied up with the agreement which is mentioned, or the proposed agreement which is mentioned in the report. When that proposed agreement was previously brought to council, we did comment at the time that this should be something that should be an open discussion with the public, and that hasn't happened. And I think it's unfortunate that tonight we're discussing this plan of management, yet one of the key underlying documents is reported confidentially. And I'll indicate now, I don't know why this should be reported confidentially. I won't be supporting that we move into confidential session to deal with that particular item, unless I can receive some advice clearly otherwise that indicates that it must be. But Councillor Hesse is right. Newington College receives, when you take together its Commonwealth funding and funding from the parents or from other sources that it receives as a private school, receives literally 10, 100 times as much funding as other closer schools over many, many years. And to now look to deny local kids and others, I mean, now more than ever, we know how important these parks are for everyone. To say that we're going to give over some part of the park to a private school, I just think that it wouldn't be accepted. And I think that it wouldn't be accepted by our community, and that's why I think it's essential that we actually get this out to the public, because it's just not something that we should build into these kinds of plans of management, which are for the public, not for those who can afford it.
Okay, thank you for that, councillor. Just before I go,
Chair, can I say something?
yes, councillor Macri.
Chair, the reason I supported this is because I was on the council when we looked to actually do this and progress this plan of management. And what this plan of management was based on, it would not exclude any users that are current users, but expand the ability for the ground to be used more. So this talk of exclusion and privatisation, I don't know where that's coming from. Obviously, they haven't read the business papers properly. And, you know, we can't talk about the confidential stuff, but it clearly states in there, it's not a privatisation, and there were parts of it that would go ahead and parts of it would not, because they would impact. So this is taking away from the community the opportunity to have access to premium sports facilities. That's all it is. You're taking away from the community. You're not giving the community anything, because the use that has been negotiated is no different from the current use that they have now and they use these fields for. They're not getting these extra use. They're just maintaining their current use and sharing that with the whole community, the upgrade, which is partially funded by them. So I think that argument is nonsensical and strange. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I might just speak briefly to the matter as well. Councillor Cat, I'm also very relaxed about the matter being discussed in public. There's certainly no conspiracy theory there. The fact is that Newington is a very wealthy, elite local institution which has been using the grounds for many, many years. And what they're proposing is that they make a significant contribution, which we'll discuss in confidential session because it's commercial in confidence, a significant contribution to improving a public facility to maintain the same usage that they currently have and have done for many years. And the fact that the project is in the public interest is demonstrated by the fact that it's had public support from the Marrickville Red Devils, from local AFL teams, from a range of different sporting institutions who understand the council resolution, which is that we will seek to control the ground and make use of the ground the rest of the time for the benefit of all of those clubs. And we know that the great intensification of use that will come through synthetic surfacing at Tempe Reserve will mean that there'll be a much larger benefit than we would otherwise get. I'm afraid that this is a return to the fairly retrograde debates about synthetic surfacing, which the sporting community across Australia has accepted is the way that they can get kids onto the training paddock without kids missing out. So I'll certainly be in support of adopting the officer's recommendation and moving on with this project for the benefit of all of the local clubs who are in support of it. Now, councillors, is there any further discussion?
Yes, I would like to speak.
I've got Councillor Passis, then Councillor McKenna. Councillor Passis. Councillor Passis?
Can you hear me?
I can now, yes.
It's terribly sad that this is about private schools versus public. This is what I've heard from Councillor Kiat and Councillor Hesse. It's the policy of the Greens that anything private, and it's bringing up this them and us. If it's an outcome for the whole LGA, as Councillor Macri said, people that had no access before because the facilities were no good and not upgraded will have more now at someone else's expense. We cannot afford to deliver all these things. It's really sad that those two councillors think they have to stick to their manifesto of really going after anything private and private schools. I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor McKenna?
Just to clarify, please, Mr. Mayor, as I recall in these in one of these reports, that they'll still be paying the normal fee for the use of the park, despite the fact that they'll be contributing to the work. Is that correct?
I'll put that question to the officers.
Through the chair, councillors, my preference would be to discuss that in confidential session. If I can perhaps take the opportunity to clarify that the Tempe Reserve Plan of Management simply makes provision for a range of leasing opportunities within the grounds and can certainly proceed with or without any arrangements that we make for those private licensing and leasing.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, Councillor McKenna, did you wish to speak further? No, I'll go to Councillor Porteous.
Thanks, Councillor Byrne. Look, I wanted to speak specifically about this issue, about the one about the essentially what is selling off of public park to a private school, because and I think it's actually a very poor process to be considering this and not being considering at the same time the heads of agreement and the license which is being sought by Newington College, because I mean they're seeking a very, very long license. I mean, we know that the maximum amount of time that council is able to grant a license is 21 years, and we know that they're seeking a license which is longer than that. I mean, the heads of agreement actually really concerns me with the terms that are being proposed in it, and the very poor outcome I think it is for council, without being specific, because at the moment it's a confidential item. But the fact is that it does impact really significantly on the use of the playing fields, which is part of this plan of management. And I don't think you can consider one without the other. I do think that we should be moving, if we're serious about transparency, for that to be considered in open council. I just think that we're talking about a public land. This is a public park. And for whatever reason, I mean, it might sound nice when Councillor Byrne says, oh, they've been using it for a long time and now they're proposing to pay for some of the improvements on it. But let's be honest, what they're paying for is securing exclusive use of that sporting field for the times which are convenient to them. And I mean, that's actually worth paying for. That has a value to it, and they have allocated a value to it in the proposal that they've put to council. And I do think that these things need to be out in the public forum. They need to be spoken about when we're speaking about adopting this plan of management. This is a fatal flaw in the plan of management. You can't talk about one without talking about the other. And if we are now taking as policy that we're going to start to essentially sell off our public parks to any private school or any wealthy club that can afford to cough up the money because we are so desperate for funds that we are unable to do that work ourselves, then we have some really serious problems. I'm sorry, but I just think that...
Chair, can I move a point of order?
Yes, Councillor Macri.
Councillor Porteous is making misleading statements. That is not what this is actually saying. This is a plan of management, and
yes.
She's not on topic at all. And she's making assertions that we are selling. We are selling nothing.
Yes.
That wording has to be withdrawn. I want that wording withdrawn.
Yeah, I'll just make a ruling on that. Firstly, Councillor Porteous, you'll be aware that the heads of agreement is tabled in the confidential session tonight, and that any resolution coming from that will be made public. So I don't think it's fair to the officers to say that the things have been separated out. They've been reported to the same meeting, which is standard practice when things need to be considered concurrently. Secondly, whilst you could argue that that talking about sell-offs... Point of order. Sorry, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor. I'm ruling on the point of order from Councillor Macri. In relation to the issue Councillor Macri's raised about sell-offs, I'm going to ask Councillor Porteous to withdraw that, and in part because whilst we all know there's a standing resolution of the council not to sell any of our town halls, there has been an ongoing campaign publicly from Councillor Porteous and a large-scale petition from Councillor from former councillor Jamie Parker to the council about supposed sell-offs of town halls. So we don't want any confusion on that. So Councillor Porteous, I'll ask you to continue, but just to clarify that, as you're aware, there is no proposed sale of public lands on the agenda tonight.
I would argue that when you...
Councillor Porteous?
Yes, I would argue that when you
Please
grant
proceed.
a very long lease for exclusive use on a park, that equates to the selling off of that, because nobody else will be able...
Thank you. Your time has expired. Thank you, councillor.
Okay.
So further discussion, councillors.
Yeah, Councillor Lockie.
Councillor Lockie. Sorry, I've got Councillor Drury, then Councillor Lockie. Councillor Drury.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, the resolution we have before us is to put out, after it goes through the minister, to put out on public exhibition a plan of management for Tempe parks. That's the resolution. I think we should be debating that resolution and the merits of what have been put forward in terms of the plan of management, and have the other debate at the appropriate time. The linkage that's being sought to drawn was blown away by the comments from the officers. There is no necessary link between the plan of management and the other matter which will be discussed in closed session. I think that we really just need to debate and vote on the matters sequentially and stick to each matter as it comes.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lockie.
Yeah, look, just because it has been, I think Councillor Drury has commented on this as well, but I just wanted to clarify with through you, Chair, to the relevant officer, that what Councillor Drury said is indeed correct. This plan of management can be approved with or without any specific leasing agreements that we may be discussing later in this meeting, or indeed anything that might come up in the future.
I'll put that question to the officers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Further discussion. Okay, if there's no further discussion, we'll go back to the primary motion. I don't believe there's a foreshadowed motion, is there? No? Okay, we'll put the primary motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. I'll ask you to keep them raised. I'll
Could
read
you
out
say-
the name. Councillor in support are Councillors Steer, Lockie, McKenna, Macri, York, Passis, Drury, Rossetti, and against are Councillors Porteous, De Cruz, Kiat, Stamoulis, and Hesse. That has been carried. Does anyone want a clarification of that vote? I think it was pretty clear. Okay. Next item.
What was the numbers?
In support were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and against were 1, 2, 3, 4. That can't be right.
How did
Councillor
Councillor Scander vote, Mayor?
He's not here. I'll recite those again.
He is here. He is here.
Hello. Councillor Scander.
Can you hear me, please?
I can hear you now, yes. I can't see you though.
I am voting in support, and unfortunately I couldn't speak, but definitely I am in support of that.
Okay, so in support we have Councillors York, Steer, Rossetti, Passis, McKenna, Macri, Lockie, Iskander, Drury, Byrne. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. With 5 against, 5 against. That has been carried. Next item.
Can I move this motion, this item, and I'd like to make an amendment.
Councillor De Cruz.
So I've just sent an amendment through to Catherine. It's mainly asking that, is this the investment report? I mean, I'm happy to move this one as well. I thought we were up to
Councillor De Cruz is moving the local traffic committee minutes. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor McKenna. Is there anyone who wishes to clarify anything? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? I'm going to presume that that is unanimous. Is there anyone who's against the motion? That has been carried unanimously. Next item.
May I move the next item?
Oh, sorry, that was the one I was hoping to move. Oh, well. Whatever.
Oh, please.
Okay.
But I'd like to make an amendment, so I don't know how you do that.
Please speak to it. Go ahead.
Okay. The amendment which I've sent through to Catherine, and maybe she can put it up, was just to incorporate, to request the investment advisor provide us with a report, incorporate in the report details about the charters of each of the SRIs we are investing in, because at the moment we only get the title and the label and not much information about what those investments particularly mean. So I'd like that that information be incorporated in the regular reports to council.
Okay. Councillor Drury, are you still seconding that motion? Councillor Drury. He's trying to speak.
I'm a little confused about whether the councillor is asking for a report on the charter or the charters of all our investments to occur every time. If it is the latter, then I foreshadow moving the recommendation as printed.
Okay.
Okay, so can I clarify just on that? At the moment, we just get a label saying this is a green investment, this is a green bond, etc., etc. But we get very little information about what any of those labels mean and how they're reflected. So I actually got a table from Ian about it. It's not a very big table, but it just says the kind of investments that each of those investments represent, which the current labels don't provide any information really.
So, Councillor Drury, are you moving a foreshadowed motion or are you the seconder for Councillor De Cruz's motion?
Sorry, I still don't understand Councillor De Cruz's point. I'll foreshadow the recommendation as printed.
Okay, is there a seconder for the De Cruz primary motion?
Yes, Councillor Passos.
Councillor Passos, do you wish to speak to it?
Well, I don't think it's a big issue. Just more information to know instead of just looking at labels. I think every councillor should want to know that. I don't think it's much extra work for the staff. That's why I second the motion. I don't think it's rocket science, just so we can understand what we're reading and the background.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mr. Mayor?
Hold on, Councillor Drury, do you wish to speak to your foreshadowed motion?
I thank the officers for the report. I notice we are taking a hit, as you'd expect, but it is what it is.
Okay, thank you. Is there further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Councillor Stamoulis.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, as it's well known amongst council, this is a fantastic internal report for our staff. Not a very good report for councillors to use at all, but that's what we've got. Love to be able to redesign it at some stage. One question that I do have is that we talk about council's annualised return at a 1 month rate of minus 1.01. I just want to confirm, first of all, question one, if that's correct. And number two, are we using the reference rate there, the benchmark rate, as a 30-day reference rate, or would that be the 90-day bank bill rate? Thank you.
I'll put that question to the officers.
Councillor, I'll take the first question on notice, and I understand that's the 90-day bill rate at the second answer. In terms of including the charter of each of the socially responsible investments, can I suggest that rather than providing them in the monthly reports and providing more fodder, we simply put those up on our website and make it publicly available.
Okay. Councillor Stamlis, did you have a further question?
Well, just on the first question about the negative the rate return there for that particular month, thank you to the CEO for agreeing to look into that. I'm intrigued as to where that's occurred, because I've looked through the content of the report and I don't seem to spot any sort of individual rates falling at all. So it seems to be inconsistent with some of the internal data that's presented there. So it'd be good to find out what that is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. There's no further discussion. We've got the primary motion moved by Councillor De Cruz, seconded by Councillor Passis. There's a foreshadowed motion from Councillor Drury just to adopt the officer's recommendation. I'm happy to second that. I'll put Cruz Passis recommendation. All those in favour, please raise your hands and keep them raised. That is Councillors Hesse, Stamoulis, Steer, Kiat, De Cruz, Passis, and Porteous. All those against, please raise your hands. That is Councillors McKenna, Iskander, Drury, York, Macri, Lockie, and Byrne. And that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes in support, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 votes against. That has been defeated. I'll now put the foreshadowed motion.
Mayor, that was 7 votes in favour. And while it still might have been lost, that does make a difference.
I'll just go back. It's quite, I have very poor eyesight, Councillor De Cruz, and it's quite difficult for me to see the tiny little print where the votes marked against each councillor. So it's
That
quite...
was Councillor Steer, sorry.
I can, through you, Chair, I can confirm it was 7 votes for and 8 votes against. We now have 15 in attendance.
Mr. Naylor, would you mind assisting me with my myopic tendencies by when we read out the names of the votes, if you could read out the count of the votes immediately afterwards so that I can stop buggering it up, that would be great.
No problems.
Thank you very much for that. So we'll now put the foreshadowed motion moved by Councillor Drury, seconded by myself, for the adoption of the officer's recommendation. All those in favour, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got Hesse, Stamoulis, Steer, Lockie, Kiat, De Cruz, Macri, York.
What are you doing?
Passis, Drury, Raciti, Iskander, McKenna, Porteous and myself. That is unanimous. Does any councillor disagree with that? No, that has been carried.
No, what's unanimous? What are you talking about?
The vote to adopt the officer's recommendation, which was the foreshadowed motion.
What was how's it unanimous? Well, what happened to De Cruz's motion, amendments?
It was the primary motion and it was defeated 8 votes to 7. And then you just raised your hand for the foreshadowed motion along with everybody else after the
No,
defeat.
because I didn't understand. I can't understand what's going on. It's all over the place.
You wish to vote again?
This is very undemocratic. I did not vote for what Drew removed.
Okay, Councillor Passis was mistaken and is...
But hasn't anybody picked up on that I voted for both? Was I questioned on that?
People often vote for a foreshadowed motion after the primary motion has been defeated, Councillor Passes. So I'll call the meeting to order. I'll ask the minute takers just to silence other councillors from interjecting. The vote has been carried 14-1 with Councillor Passes against. Next item, item 6, COVID-19 report. Councillors.
Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
could I move an amendment which should come up pretty shortly on the screen?
I'll ask the minute takers to display that amendment from Councillor Drury. Councillor Drury, it's now on the screen.
I thank you. Firstly, I'd thank the CEO for the preliminary information that he has provided in response to our resolution at the extraordinary meeting. I understand there are a number of matters that he is still working on. You would all appreciate that I am very keen to have a good look at the financial situation. And I'm also very keen to see
Mr. Mayor.
What?
Councillor Drury has.
I'm also very keen to see what infrastructure matters we could bring forward as a local renewal matters, infrastructural renewal matters that we could bring forward to contribute to a stimulus of the local economy. In relation to the matters of council rates for both residents and also for businesses, I note that we are currently using the hardship policy of the former Leichhardt Council, and this resolution seeks to endorse that practice to put in place an additional process for those who are in receipt of the Commonwealth's JobKeeper and Job Seeker arrangements. And fourthly, I would like the CEO to bring forward a report having a look at the benefits and the costs of providing a $400 benefit to those who are in receipt of JobKeeper or Job Seeker in the November rate process. I'm not proposing that we adopt that tonight, Mayor. I am proposing that we ask the General Manager to bring us forward a report. I note that there are some other councils looking at or have adopted this proposition. I have no doubt that it is a lawful proposition. I suppose the question is, can we afford it? And what are the benefits that we perceive that will be to a group of people who are accepted by our community as being amongst the most disadvantaged by this process. Now, I understand that not all people get the Job Seeker or JobKeeper allowance, which is why I propose that we maintain the existing the old Leichhardt Council hardship policy, which I understand was a pretty good policy, although it hurts me to say it.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Porteous.
Thanks, Councillor Bray.
I've got you, Councillor Passes. I'll come to you after Councillor Porteous.
So, look, I think the Greens are in fierce agreement with you, Councillor Drury, about wanting to address reduction, the deferral of the rates, and potentially looking at a reduction in the waste costs as well, so that we can help people who are in financial stress due to COVID-19. I've actually proposed some amendments, which I hope you will find acceptable, particularly, first of all, in terms of the point 3, which, while it's picking up the hardship policy for Leichhardt Council, that is quite onerous on people in terms of requiring them to do provide paperwork. What I'm suggesting is something which would be simpler, which is if we look at the amendments that I think Ian Naylor is just bringing up now, but basically that for residents that are not eligible for job seeker or job keeper but are in financial hardship due to COVID-19, that they be granted on evidence by way of a statutory declaration demonstrating a reduction of income. If you could just remove minute taker, the 30% there, so just demonstrating a reduction of income in the 6-month period from April to 31st of October, and that they are granted at their request and with the statutory deck a deferral of their rates for the 6 months, the same as we're proposing for the job seeker and job keeper recipients. I'm proposing this because I think it's a cleaner and simpler process for those that are not eligible, rather than having to provide essentially what could be quite a lot of documentation to our council staff, and it'll achieve the same outcome. The other points that I'm proposing is that the Minister has actually permitted, the Minister for Local Government, that we can get a 1-month extension on the adoption of our budget and operational plans. So as point 5, I'm proposing that Council extend the adoption of the 2020-21 operational plan and budget by 1 month, noting that the Minister for Local Government has amended regulations to provide councils with a 1-month extension to adopt their plans and budgets. And also as point 6, again, the Minister has permitted councils to delay the sending out of their first quarterly rates for 2020-21 by 1 month, and that we also take up that and adopt that as well. So I'd propose all of those. If I could just have a short extension on my time, I just wanted to speak to the substance of the response of the CEO to the mayoral minute as well.
I'll move an extension of time of 1 minute for Councillor Porteous, seconded by Councillor Rosidi. All those in favour, against, declare that carried.
Thank you. Look, I do think that we need to have more extensive responses to a lot of the points that were in that mayoral minute. Specifically as well, we asked for a report to be tabled relating to the budget at this meeting today, and that was intended to be tabled at this meeting because it was intended to be a public document. Unfortunately, what we've received instead is a councillor briefing short presentation, which came through late yesterday. While that is welcome, it's really not what the resolution says, and the resolution it does need to be adhered to. So, and it concerns me that quite a lot of the other points that were in that mayoral minute, which were adopted unanimously by the entire council body, really have not been, in many cases, adequately addressed. So the mayor may want to form some words, but I do think that we need to stress that we do need to have those reports that were identified actually tabled at the next council meeting, and we do need to make sure that we're getting full responses to all of those items which were listed in that mayoral minute. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. So we've got the primary motion from Councillor Drury. We've got amendments from Councillor Porteous, which we'd now be required to consider. Is there a seconder for the amendments from Councillor Porteous? Sing out of those.
Yes, Councillor Steer.
Councillor Steer, do you wish to speak? Do you wish to speak to them?
No, I endorse Councillor Porteous's comments.
Councillor Drury, can I ask you to clarify whether you wish to incorporate Councillor Porteous's amendments?
Could I get office a comment on the feasibility or any concerns they have in relation to any of the 3 points?
Okay, I'll put that question to the officers.
Thanks, councillors. And I thank Councillor Drury for the extensive consultation that he's undertaken with officers on his proposed motion. I've only just now, like perhaps some other councillors, seen the amendment proposed by councillors Porteous and Steer. So my comments are a little on the run. I'm not sure that point 3 will actually reduce the effort for residents not eligible for JobSeeker or JobKeeper to apply. The process in place, which is already working, is quite simple and it's quite easy, and the officers are directed by me to favour people with their applications rather than make it difficult. So I'm not sure that a statutory declaration demonstrating reduction of income is sufficient, but nor is it necessarily going to work. So I'm not sure about that. I simply need to consider that further because I've seen it for about 1.3 minutes. In terms of point 5, we are still planning to produce and engage councillors with the operational plan and budget on the original timetable so that councillors are able to consider that. Councillors can consider, of course, whether they wish to defer that. That's a matter for you as the elected representatives. The additional point 6, that council delay sending out the first quarterly rates notice by a month. If we imagine that 10% of our community are unemployed as a consequence of COVID-19, and perhaps it's reasonable to suggest that half of those were owner occupiers, that would be 5%. We as officers would prefer to apply what is a very good hardship policy to that 5% rather than deferral for all of the quarterly notices, because that will create us a cash flow problem and will impact on a range of services, and in particular our capital works. So just in recap, the first one we would need to consider further, and I'm not in a position to give proper advice on that, but I'm concerned about that. The second one is a matter for council, but we are in place and scheduled to try and get our budget up in the original timeframe. And the third one we do not support. In terms of the comments from Councillor Porteous, asking council officers to produce over 40 reports without any proper consultation with staff within a period of 2 weeks is completely unreasonable. We are flat out dealing with lots and lots of community issues to deal with the impact of a global pandemic. And we are doing our best to keep councillors informed of what's happening and the changes that are made, but none of us are supermen or women.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Porteous, did you have any further questions in that regard?
Sorry, Darcy. I suggest that we debate the replacement of point 3. I will accept point 5, and I suggest we debate point 6.
Okay, thank you for
Could I
that.
speak to Chair, if I can? Colin Hesse.
Yes, Councillor Hesse.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate that. And look, I thank you for your verbal consultation with this motion yesterday, and I thank Councillor Drury for his work and Councillor Porteous for her work in the amendments. I speak in favour of both. I also want to acknowledge at the top of the discussion, as Councillor Byrne and I discussed yesterday, that we have very, very limited powers at local government level to intervene in the response to this matter. Of course, we have very limited legal space to move. We also have limited financial abilities too. And of course, this doesn't address really the issues for, I think, about 50% of people in our area who rent. Nonetheless, the problems for people who have mortgages or even own their own homes are very real in this circumstance. So I think we do need to make a response, and I think the response is a measured one. I'd like to speak particularly in favour of points 3 and, I think the other one, count 5, has been adopted or incorporated by Councillor Drury. I thank him for that. I think, well, I do take on board what the CEO said about the way it's operating. I think it's important for us as an elected body to, I can't see a conflict, frankly, between what the CEO said is actually happening and what Councillor Porteous has proposed. So I think it's good for us as a council, elected council, to essentially give guidance and support, if this is what we're doing, to what's actually happening. I don't think this, from what I see, actually undermines what Councillor Porteous has moved. I do take the point from the CEO about delay in sending out rates notices, and I'd be, frankly happy to defer that for more information on what it would cost. But I think the point 3 that really gives guidance to our community, to our staff, and support, I think, is an important one to add to Councillor Drury's original amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Further discussion,
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
It's me, is it?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Mayor, I would have thought that...
Mr. Mayor, I was next to speak.
I'll come to you afterwards, Councillor Passos.
Will you please do things democratically?
Councillor Stamoulis has the floor. I'll come to you next, Councillor Passos.
Mr. Mayor, I thought that most of this motion could have been wrapped up, in fact, by a very effective hardship policy, which I think could deal with every single one of these issues. But I suppose if you want to fine tune that a little bit, the additional points do that. But I think we have a very good hardship policy, and I think that should be supported by the following amendment, that along with the rates notice, council to provide information in the rates notice that council has a hardship policy, in particular in relation to the COVID environment, and that we would welcome any residents who need to avail themselves of that they can do so. I think that is the best way of dealing with this. I second that. Thank you. I also agree with our CEO that any delay of the rates notices is likely to hurt our organisation far more than the benefit it will provide. So I think in this because of the numbers involved, I think the CEO is correct that 95% of our municipality probably will have, of the rate paying municipality will probably have the capability to meet their payments. But so long as those others, that other 5%, whatever it might be, 10%, know that we have this hardship policy in place, that it's strong within the current environment we have, I think that would satisfy me greatly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Passos.
Councillor, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Passos. Perhaps just to assist, we have included a note in the rates notice to that effect.
Oh, well, if that's the case, then the amendment's not needed. Thank you.
Okay, so can I get clarification about that just from the Chief Executive? Has the rates notice been distributed as yet?
It's as I understand it, Councillor, it is at Australia Post. It's ready to go. Whether we can stop it or not, I'm not sure. But there is a note to the effect that people can apply for the hardship assistance.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Councillor Passos.
Yes, as Councillor Stamoulis said, we do have a hardship policy. To the appropriate officer, could you, a ballpark figure, has council been contacted by how many residents citing hardship?
I'll put that question to the officers.
Thanks, Councillor. As COVID-19 has occurred after the previous quarterly notice, we've had, I think, about a dozen requests. We expect with this distribution of the rates notice that will increase substantially, and we have streamlined our system to make sure that those hardship requests are dealt with efficiently and effectively and in favour of those seeking assistance.
Okay, my next one. First, I'd like to say, I'd like to know who's going to make the decision on what case by case, what do they mean by hardship, and what will be approved and what won't be approved. I would also like an amendment, if councillors would accept it, that the commercial business be afforded the same opportunity that we're giving to house owners. And we are a council and we pride ourselves on looking after the vulnerable. Now, the most vulnerable in our community would not gain any benefit out of this. And the COVID report seems we've got nothing back about our vulnerable people. Maybe I'm just going off on a tandem here, but one of our residents that's well known by the mental health in the area, our community services, what are they doing to follow up? Because they go into Mrs. Homes and asking for food and toilet paper. We're looking after people, it's commendable, that have $1 million properties and worrying about their hardship. What have we done about the vulnerable that need to knock on the neighbour's door and be given food and toilet paper and everything else they need? What are our staff doing there? I would also like our business to be afforded the same opportunity. Will the notices be going to those people, even though they might own the property and they don't pay rates, but it is factored into their rent? And I think at the moment we've jumped the gun. We really should defer this and sit back and wait and see how much hardship is out there. Because the federal government has come to the party and helped people who have lost their jobs. They've helped the pensioners. So maybe let's just wait and see how desperate it is out there. And again, I will repeat, who makes the decision on hardship? And how do we gauge the hardship?
Councillor Passos, I will bring that question to the officers in just a moment, but just in relation to your suggestion about commercial rates, we wouldn't be able to issue any dispensation to commercial rate payers on the same grounds as the residential rate payers, because by definition, businesses are not going to be accessing job seeker as recipients in that sense. Well, they will be, but on behalf of their workers. So I'm not sure that that directly equates. I'm sure we are all very concerned to make sure that we do something to help businesses.
But if the businesses, if the tenants are not paying their rent, and maybe also we've got to go to our commercial property owners. Look, we're not doing anybody any favours here. I'd just like to remind councillors, we have the highest rates in New South Wales.
I'll call the meeting to order.
Councillor, the highest rates.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Councillor, you've spoken to the matter. I'm with you. I'd like to work with you on a proposal for assistance to commercial rate payers, but we need one on a different basis to residential rate payers. And as to the other question that you raised, I'll just put that to the officers.
Thanks, councillors. A couple of issues. Who decides on the hardship? The hardship provisions under the previous Leichhardt Council, now part of the Inner West Council policy, are very clear and very simple and in favour of the applicant. If there are any issues...
Where is the policy? Where is the policy, Mr...
We can get you a copy of the policy.
Thank you.
Up on the website.
Excuse me, who said have a look on the website?
You said it's up on the website. I was trying to be helpful.
So...
I'm glad they find it funny.
Okay, I'll call
Councillor
Drury. Continue, Mr. Mayor.
I'll call the meeting to order. I'll just go back to the Chief Executive to conclude his answer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if there are any issues, we have an internal process to review and make sure that we're support the applicant wherever possible.
Would councillors hold? Will councillors be given a report?
I'm sorry, councillor. I'm going to go. I'm sorry, councillor Passos. I was doing the meeting.
How can I vote on something we're not sure about the details?
You've spoken to it. You've asked several questions which have been answered. I'm now just going to go to the next speaker. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the matter?
Yes, I do.
Sorry. Could I finish?
Can I just clarify something, Darcy, as well?
Okay.
I'd like to speak.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm going to adjourn the meeting for a period of 5 minutes. I'll see you back here in 5 minutes. The meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
Okay, councillors, we'll resume the meeting in just a moment. The meeting is resumed. I'll go to the Chief Executive to be able to finally conclude his response to the question.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I've just text messaged both yourself and Councillor Passis on the matters that she has raised. I think we've dealt with the hardship policy and its application for residential residents, residential ratepayers, business ratepayers, commercial tenants, commercial landlords. There are processes in place for that group as well. And I should acknowledge the fantastic support we've had from Mark Chapman and the local Chamber of Commerce in supporting that process. He helped us redesign the application form, and we are processing those applications as they come through. And that is a very strong partnership with the local business community, and it includes all the local chambers of commerce and many of their members. Councillor Passis also asked about the vulnerable. We have our own extensive outreach program for the vulnerable. There are significant state and Commonwealth resources being applied for the vulnerable as well. And collectively, we, government agencies, working extremely closely, as the Mayor knows, with the non-government organisations to make sure that we look after all of those who might be in trouble. And give credit to the community as well. There are many local community outreach programs as well, operating on a street-by-street basis, making sure that the community are being looked after. And one of the great things of being Australians is that we do think about others. In terms of the renters, this is an issue that Councillor Drury in particular has been raising with me over the last week or so, and how we might best support people who are paying rent. It is typically a state government responsibility, but we are also thinking of how we best support people in rental positions, particularly if they're out of work, and how we might support that. The complications with paying or supporting or deferral the payment of rates for owners is in two categories. Clearly, owner-occupiers are a different category from owner-investors, and there's a whole host of issues about owner-investors and how they might support their tenants. But we continue to focus on that, and we're trying to look after as many people as we can.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Yeah.
Could I ask a question?
No, sorry. I've got Councillor Kiat next. That was a very thorough answer from the Chief Executive. I'll go to Councillor Kiat.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Byrne, and thanks, Michael, for that response. I think most of us are in agreement here. What we're doing, and when I say most of us, I include, obviously the Chief Executive who's just laid out that a lot of what we're proposing is what has already been underway, although there hasn't been a rates notice since the crisis has hit in a big way. What we're agreed on is that we need to be very clear with the community that we don't want to be onerous in terms of applying our hardship policy at this time of unprecedented economic crisis, that we want to make it very easy for people who are experiencing economic hardship to be able to access the hardship provisions that already exist. And I think what has been proposed by Councillor Drury is very sensible. I think I had the opportunity during our short adjournment to discuss with Councillor Porteous the intention of the amendment that she's proposed, and was able to clarify there was no intention to increase the level of evidence that's required to access the hardship provisions. Rather, what she's getting at is if evidence is required, we're not going to ask people to be providing bank statements, pay certificates from work or something from Centrelink which might have been lost. At the very most, we're going to ask people, well, if we're going to require evidence, you can provide a stat deck and that's it. All you have to do is tell us this is what's happening to you. But I think that in most cases, I'm very glad that the Chief Executive is taking a position that, well, we don't even require that level of evidence. If someone contacts us and says that they're experiencing hardship, I think in most cases, or in all cases, I don't see any problem with us accepting that, because we know that that is the reality out there right now. So look, I think all that Councillor Porteous is trying to do, and I support her in that, is setting the maximum level of evidence that we'll require before we say that's fine, that's enough. But I don't think that she's suggesting that we make it more onerous. And I think bringing together those who are on JobKeeper and JobSeeker and those who are not recognises that, yeah, unfortunately, the Commonwealth Government excluded significant portions of workers and those who aren't working from those payments, and we need to address them too.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further discussion, councillors?
Yes, Councillor De Cruz.
Okay, now hold on. I've got Councillor Steer, Councillor Macri, Councillor McKenna, and then Councillor De Cruz.
And I wanted to amend my amendment, Darcy.
I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Councillor Steer.
Oh, I don't have anything to say about this.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought you had questions. Councillor Macri.
Thanks. Oh, thanks, Chair. I've sent some amendments up to Ian, if he can put them up, if he's got them, so we could discuss them. And it relates to some relief for the businesses. So if council could waive health, hygiene, licensing, fire safety inspection fees for all businesses that have been closed or their trading hours curtailed as a result of the crisis. So basically, when you get a fire inspection on a building, you have to engage a contractor. The contractor comes out, fills in a form, and then you pay about $200, $250 for council to register and process that. I think if the businesses are closed, the building still has to be maintained safe. So these inspections need to happen, but it's just another onerous cost. And if we've got a lot of staff that are basically not doing anything in certain areas, and that jumps down to number 3 there, if they can be retasked and retooled, and we can give those businesses some relief. And the other point too is council continue to provide pickup services. I mean, I've been getting a lot of people calling me and asking me why they can't understand why the recycling centres, and it's really a matter of urgency that we look into that, because as they're home, they're doing more things and they're cleaning up, and if we can get some of those services back online, as well as the actual service centres. I mean, the banks put up Perspex screens and they seem to be perfectly safe. Is that something we could look at doing, getting some service centres back up where we put up the Perspex screens at the actual front desks? Is that something that can be entertained? I suppose that's more a question to the CEO. And also another issue that came to me was with the parking permits, council said basically if you can't renew online, they'll extend it out to October, and that's great, but not all our people are computer literate or computer savvy, and there are a lot of older people that do use those permits, and they're in a flux. They don't know what to do because they haven't got that information. If some of the staff that are actually not actively employed in their proper jobs, if they can actually just send letters out to the people with permits saying to them, you can do it online or we're extending it out to October, so they know. It creates unrest and anxiety for people that are challenged with.
Sorry, I'm very sorry to interrupt Councillor Macri. And I'm saying this point of order so that we can adequately consider what you're proposing. I'm just concerned that we're now, and sorry, I just want to raise this point of order, and I hope Councillor Macri, you'll agree with me on this. I think you're raising some substantial separate issues to the amendments that I believe that we're currently debating. And I'm just wondering whether it might be more useful to deal with the amendments under debate in relation to the rent relief, and then deal separately with the amendments that you propose so that we can have a full debate on that also, rather than try to debate all the amendments together.
Okay, well, Councillor Kiat, you're predominantly correct in that we should be going back to deal with the Porteous amendment before anything else. Councillor Macri's amendments are certainly relevant to the report, which we're considering in regards to the response to the crisis. So I'll just let councillors know it is quite tricky to keep track of people's amendments and the process with the meeting when we're doing it remotely as chair. So I'll just ask you to bear with me because it's not that easy to do. So we'll go back to Councillor
Now, I'll make things a little easy for you. I'll adopt all of Macri.
Okay, we'll come back and deal with that, but we are going to deal with the Porteous amendments. I can see you, Councillor McKenna. I will come back to you, but I just want to know, does any other councillor wish to speak on the one Porteous amendment which is being voted on? Councillor McKenna.
I'm just wondering if it would help if I amended first, but anyway.
I believe Councillor Drury has only accepted one of the Porteous amendments. The change to point 3, I don't support. I think we actually have a clear process and we have a policy. I don't understand why we would be wanting to put in another layer or instead of a stat deck when the CEO has very clearly told us that the policy is working. So I would always go for a policy rather than a stat deck. The other thing is I don't support the delay in the rates notice. I think that just delays the problem. It could impact on our cash flow, and the sooner we send it, and it's not going out for some weeks, the first notice, that if we delay it, it just delays the problem, and we'll end up with where we'll find out sooner if people are going to have a problem paying their rates the sooner we send it out. So I don't think there's anything to be gained by delaying it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that.
Can I just ask a question?
Clarify, Kat.
Well, guys, I can adjourn the meeting repeatedly if you want. I can promise you we won't get to the rest of the business. I really won't be able to continue to conduct the meeting if there's multiple points of order and interjections from people. I know everyone's just seeking to ask questions, but it's actually quite hard to manage. So I'm just going to go back to the process that I just articulated. We need to vote on the two amendments from Councillor Porteous.
Which I'd like to amend if I could.
Yeah, well, I'll come to you to give a right of reply and to amend them further if you wish. But first of all, I'll just clarify, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on them?
Yes, could I just ask, it's kind of related to the deferral. Is that okay to speak?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, because lots of people go to banks and to the service centre to actually pay their rates. And if we still have this social isolation of people over 70, whether people will have difficulty in actually paying the rates, what is the situation if they need an extension of the time to pay? Can any of the officers answer that?
I'll put that question to the officers.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. If people have trouble paying, we will make sure that we bend over backwards to assist them. We can manage that with support of the community.
Okay. If there's no further discussion on the Porteous amendments, we're going to go and vote on them. The first, which is on the screen, is moved by Councillor Porteous, seconded by Councillor Steer.
Councillor Byrne, I was seeking to amend them. Can I do that, please? Thanks. First of all, I want to, I'm going to withdraw point 6. So we don't have to vote on that. I think I've heard the debate on that, so I'm withdrawing point 6.
Right.
Okay. In terms of point 3, I think the purpose of this is to simplify and to make it easier for people to make that application for a deferral of their rates. It's not to make it more complicated. My concern when reading the hardship policy was that, in fact, it was requiring people to provide evidence, and a simplification of that was a stat deck. So what I'm proposing, I've just sent through some wording there, is we can leave the hardship, the Leichhardt Council hardship policy in, and I've just proposed that where evidence as an additional line there, where evidence is required, council will not require onerous forms of evidence and will accept a statutory declaration as sufficient. That's what I'm trying to achieve, just to make things as simple and as streamlined as possible.
Councillor Drury, does that change your position in regards to whether that can be incorporated? Councillor Drury?
No.
No. Okay. So we'll vote on the Porteous Steer amendment, which has now been amended. So there's not two, there's just one. And the entire first sentence of Amendment 3 is deleted. So it just now reads, where evidence is required, council will not require onerous forms of evidence and will accept a statutory declaration as sufficient. All those in favour, please raise your hands. In favour, I have Councillor Hesse, Stamoulis, Steer. Councillor Passis, I believe, with her hand up. Oh, she's saying something. She has her hand in the air. Councillor Raciti.
You did not give me the opportunity to speak on Councillor Porteous's amendments.
Well, I asked if anyone wished to speak.
I tried to get through.
Please proceed.
I tried to get through. We have to be very careful with this. In this time, yes, but we have to be careful. People need to show proof of hardship. Sadly, we have people out there that don't tell the truth. And we're not a charitable organisation. That we need to have proof of hardship. We're not going into their home. We don't want to look at their bank accounts, but there must be some proof of hardship more than a stat dex. Stat dex costs money. Also, it's going to be very hard to run around and find a justice of the peace to sign them and witness them. That's why we cannot vote on this without getting this really down pat.
Okay, I'll now attempt to put the Porteous amendment.
So, okay, there's no comment on that. Let's just willy-nilly throw it up. We are going out of our way to help.
Councillor Passis, would you prefer that I adjourn the meeting? Everyone who wanted to has now spoken on the amendment. You've spoken after the right of reply.
No, Mr. Mayor, because I could not get through. I am saying maybe this needs tweaking a little bit more on what proof do we need of hardship. It's only going to be a dog's breakfast after. Is it going to be reported to councillors how many have applied? Will we be told of the outcome?
I'm sorry, Councillor Passis, that question has been answered by the Chief Executive. I'll now put the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. In favour are Councillors Hesse, Stamoulis, Steer, Passis, De Cruz, Porteous.
I wonder why Councillor Drury is not showing himself on the screen. Maybe he doesn't want us to see why he's laughing so much.
Okay, I'll adjourn the meeting if you'd prefer, councillors. Could I ask the minute takers to please mute all of the councillors who aren't currently counting the vote? I won't count the vote further until the interjections have deceased. Councillors Kiat and Lockie, are you in support of the motion or not?
Is this just the amendment that we're voting on?
Yes.
This is, yes, the amendment, support of the amendment.
Okay.
I am.
I didn't catch that, Councillor Lockie.
I'm not in support.
Okay, thank you. That's Councillor Lockie against Councillor Kiat in support and myself against. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 against. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4. Is that correct, Mr. Naylor?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That has been defeated. We'll now go back to the substantive debate. We've heard from almost all councillors Is there any, Councillor McKenna, you were next on the list. Councillor McKenna, do you wish to speak?
Point of order. Can I just ask, are we now debating the subsequent amendments?
No, there are no subsequent amendments. Councillor Porteous withdrew the second one that was debated. And one was incorporated. Councillor McKenna.
Councillor Byrne, can I raise a point of order?
Of course.
It's related to the council code of conduct that we're working under at the moment. You've given instruction on a couple of occasions for the officers to mute all of the councillors. I don't think that should be allowed under our code of conduct for all of the councillors to be muted. I acknowledge the fact that some councillors are speaking out of turn, but I think that needs to be managed rather than muting all the councillors.
Okay, well, no, I agree on that. I'll do my best, but just to be frank, if there's ongoing interjections, I'll just discontinue the meeting because it's actually quite challenging. And it's not really a process that you can undertake if there's ongoing interjections. You can do that in a council chamber. You can't really do it through a teleconference. So let's aim to get through the rest of the business. We're on to debating the substantive motion moved by Councillor Drury with a number of amendments now incorporated into it. Councillor McKenna, did you wish to speak to it?
No, Mayor, I spoke.
Could I speak, Councillor De Cruz?
Yes, I had
or
you
ask some questions.
Councillor.
Just going through the report that's come from the CEO, on the point about local parks remaining open, I'm a bit concerned that some of the pocket parks, which are labelled playgrounds, have been closed. And I'd really like to see those opened again and just the play equipment cordoned off. Can I get a comment from the officers on that, please?
I'll put that question to the Chief Executive or the relevant officer.
Thanks, Councillor. If you want to raise particular parks with me, I'm happy to deal with those on a case by case. But we have had issues of lots of children and their parents turning up and not just using the play equipment, but the whole of the park, including one or two special parks on Elizabeth Street in Ashfield, where we've had to ask people to leave. So it's just a matter of trying to manage that. We obviously trying to weigh the balance between exercise and friendship and all the things that kids need as against the risk of them becoming infected by others. So it's a balancing act. If you think we've got the balance wrong, then let us know. While I'm talking, could I just raise the issue that Councillor Macri has raised about waivers? We've not seen this before. We would need to have that time limited in any event while we try and work through the detail of that. So perhaps could I suggest that that might apply for, say, 6 months, and it could be reviewed, and the council officers intend reporting back on all of these issues on a monthly basis.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Macri, are you happy to...
Could I have one other question? Sorry.
Okay, I'll go back to Councillor Macri then.
Yeah, I'm happy for that.
Okay, so the
could I have another question?
Yes, you
Sorry,
can.
Could I?
Just wait. No, just
Okay.
wait a moment, please. Just wait a moment.
Okay.
Councillor Macri, Councillor Macri's amendment in regards to fees being waived for inspections has been amended to have a time limit of 6 months, as per the advice. Councillor De Cruz.
Yeah, my question was about what we're doing with the NGOs and whether we can perhaps list them, because one of the things that's been a real issue apparently with them is they've lost their volunteers because they were all the people over 70 who were considered vulnerable. So for example, St. Vinny's in Leichhardt was open, and I just noticed today it's closed. So on point, there's a point F there about NGOs and charitable sector. Can we, I don't know, list those organisations on our website saying they're looking for volunteers? I also noticed that the Bower, for example, is actually recruiting staff. So whether we can actually incorporate that into our coronavirus page, that would be good.
Okay, thank you for that. Further discussion, councillors. We've heard from almost everyone. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Drury for a right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, for chairing what I understand to be difficult circumstances. I'd also like to thank the CEO and acknowledge the enormous stress and strains that he and the staff are under.
Sorry, Councillor Byrne, you need a seconder? I'm happy to second.
Yep, Councillor Porteous is the seconder. Now, Councillor Drury, before I go to you, I'm sorry, I've just received a text from Mr. Naylor that there is an amendment from Councillor Passis, which she has submitted, which I'll ask the minute takers to bring up on the screen. I'm going to rule that reads that commercial businesses be offered the same opportunity given to property owners. I'm going to rule that out of order on the basis that we can't extend to commercial business owners a category that says that they are qualified for job seeker. They're not unemployed, they're not on the dole, and they are also not in the way that we're intending in the resolution. They are not recipients of JobKeeper. That the benefit of that goes to the employee. So I'm going to rule that out of order, but restate my willingness to work with Councillor Passis on a proposal for the next meeting or a subsequent one to seek to help commercial businesses in regards to rates. So Councillor Drury, I'll now go to you to make your right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor. Recap, thank you for chairing a difficult debate, and I think we all understand how difficult these processes are. Thank the CEO and the officers for working under extraordinary circumstances. I just will remind the CEO that we as a council see ourselves as setting an overall policy direction, and that we see it's his role to actually have that implemented. I, for one, do not seek to give him advice on how to implement the policy. I think we should just design good policy and let him get on with it. I think the matters in relation to what concessions we might give to those affected in terms of their rates and other fees and charges are an appropriate decision for a council to make. I thank everyone for their constructive engagement on this process. I apologise to Councillor Porteous. I misunderstood one of the amendments that I earlier gave agreement for, but I just, when I saw the light of day after a busy day, couldn't support that. So my apologies in relation to that point. I'd urge people to all support this as we go forward.
Okay, thank you for that. On that, so we've got the we've got all of the amendments that have been incorporated. So there is one primary motion moved by Councillor Drury, seconded by Councillor Porteous. All those in favour, please raise your hands. In support, I have Councillors Hesse, Stamoulis, Steer, Macri, York, Iskander, McKenna, Passis, Racidi, De Cruz, Drury, Lockie, Kiat, Porteous, and Byrne. That is unanimous. That has been carried. Thank you very much, everybody. Next item, WestConnex Community Liaison Forum. Councillors, Councillor Porteous.
Thanks, Councillor Byrne. Look, I've actually sent a motion to the minute taker, which I think they're bringing up now. Basically, looking at the response from the CEO, which I thank him for, I think we're in a situation now where we understand the situation in terms of the role of Transport New South Wales And I guess in terms of that, the actual need for an ongoing forum, I'm really pleased about the fact that the CEO has said that he will chair this meeting. I think that is really critical that we do that, and that we get that kind of level of guidance on this particular committee, which I think is going to be a very important committee. I am really worried about what's happening with WestConnex. I know there's an urgent motion coming up after these other motions tonight, which is highlighting just some of the terrible issues which are being faced by our local residents, with a whole lot of changes to our road network, right through a lot of our residential areas being proposed by Transport for New South Wales, and absolutely relates to the fact that particularly the most recent WestConnex link is a disaster, and they're trying to resolve that by really making a total mess of our local transport network. And I think with the fact that the Western Harbour Tunnel is now looming and is going to be increasingly something of great concern for the local community and council, I think this forum is going to be a really important forum. So what is proposed is that the WestConnex Community Liaison Forum be continued with the inclusion of the Western Harbour Tunnel and Beaches Link with other infrastructure projects under the control of the state, that those meetings be held in the evening so that more community members can attend, be open to the community, including representatives of community groups, and be attended by the council CEO and senior members of Transport New South Wales and relevant projects. And councillors should also be invited to attend the forum meetings. And I'd just like to also thank Councillor Lockie, who I understand will be seconding this, for her really great advocacy work as well in getting us to this point where I hope this will be supported by the majority of councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Speaking of Councillor Lockie, do you wish to second and speak to the motion?
Yes, I'll second it, and I'll just speak briefly to say, look, I'd really like to acknowledge and thank Councillor Porteous for bringing this to council some months ago now, in between delaying while we negotiated this through and then being hit by coronavirus. Also acknowledge all of the residents and residents groups who've been involved in that previous forum, who've been in contact with not just Councillor Porteous and myself, but a number of councillors about their views on the forum and what improvements needed to be made. And I'd also like to acknowledge the efforts of the CEO for getting us to a point where he's negotiated with the Department of Transport for New South Wales to get them involved and committed at a very senior level in this forum. Because I think what the issue with the forum before is I think it started in a good place and then became perhaps less effective over time in getting the outcomes that residents needed, as less senior people, both at council and on the project side, were involved in it. So whilst residents were finding it a useful forum to air their views to council staff, and if they weren't actually getting those views progressed with the people who are actually implementing the projects in our area. I'm also very conscious that while obviously WestConnex and soon Western Harbour Tunnel are going to be key focuses for a forum like this, I do think it's commendable that the forum's focus is going to allow it to have a life beyond and that is greater than those two projects, because we are all very aware of the number of transport infrastructure projects that are forecast for the Inner West, as well as developments that are going to need proper transport networks to be implemented. So I'm glad to see that this forum will also have an ability to get the community involved in that at a high level and get the council advocating it. And I know Councillor Porteous referred to the fact that we'll be discussing later this evening an urgency motion on the latest changes that are being proposed for our road network in Haberfield, Ashfield and Leichhardt that are going to have a really disastrous impact on our local area. I think that proves the need for a forum like this that has that ability to both get information and consult and advocate at that very high level at very early stages of the project, because I think we would all be of one mind in saying that we don't want to get blindsided with something like that again at a stage where it's already progressed and going out to public consultation, and then we're having to try and clean up that mess afterwards. Councillor Byrne, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Is there any councillor who wishes to speak against the motion or to amend it?
Councillor Byrne, Councillor Passos is trying to attention.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. Councillor Passos?
Yes, I need some more information on this. I'm not that interested in the WestConnex issue, but what I'm concerned about, what is our council doing with residents have received a community update about what they're proposing for our local area, and it looks like that we're going to be cut off. I don't believe in public meetings and people playing politics. I believe in substantial information and the professionals becoming involved. Our traffic officers, do they have any comment to make on this? And are they aware of this leaflet that's just been, that is at this moment being distributed to our residents?
Yeah.
This community update. First of all, are they aware of this leaflet that's going around?
I'll put that question to the Chief Executive or the relevant officer.
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, we are aware of the leaflet. We've had traffic officers have been substantially involved in this matter. The proposals from Transport for New South Wales have a number of serious problems with the way they're dealing with it. The community response has been at the Leichhardt end to consider what matters are reasonable and sensible. For example, the Daly Road proposal and the reduction of traffic lights from 2 to 1 seems to be a sensible proposal. But the rat running that will be caused by some of the other proposals, in particular turning Norton Street and some others into major traffic fares, we think a real problem. At the Haberfield end, the community there has substantial issues with the proposals that are being considered. The traffic officers have been unable to convince Transport for New South Wales at this stage to release either the other options that they might have considered, the analysis of those options, the data that has been provided or should have been provided, and then the substance of that data. So we are heavily engaged in this issue, and the council officers with the community are deeply concerned about the proposals being put to them, that WestConnex promised to take the weight off the community. This is putting the weight back onto the community and is likely to be a considerable impost on all of the residents of the areas affected.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Passos, did you have any further questions?
That our council contact, I want to know what's happening to people over here on the north side and my side. We're going to be cut off from Haberfield. There's no way we're going to be able to get across. I think there's a pedestrian bridge proposed somewhere up near Orpington Street, which I think is a bad location. This is a very serious issue, and it's come about too, and I think their decisions are made on the earlier councils not wanting rat runs through the suburbs, and now we're paying the price for it. We are being cut off from the Haberfield side, the Leichhardt side, the people over in the Asheville CBD and my area, the north side over here. I really do not know the answer to this, as we cannot convene public meetings, and public meetings really only, we have everyone's different personal problem, but maybe as a matter of urgency, we write to them and tell them that we're not going to accept this and it has to be put on hold until people can get together. We can get objections or support from our residents, and we need to be able to have them come to our council and explain to us physically where their proposals are wrong.
Yeah.
It can't be something we're doing by phones and by meetings getting all mucked up and people looking for a bit of political kudos. This is a serious issue that's going to affect all our ratepayers and not just people who are opposed to WestConnex.
If I could just ask the minute takers to bring the clock and the minutes back up on the screen, or maybe I've done that on my own screen. Councillor Passos, I think we're really getting to the gist of the urgency motion that Councillors McKenna and Racidi have tabled for tonight in regards to the plans, expressing the same view as yours. And so I might suggest that we deal with that when we get to the urgency motion. Is there any further amendment to the Porteous-Lockie recommendation?
No, not at all, because I won't be voting for it.
Okay. I'll go to Councillor Porteous for a right of reply.
Thanks, Councillor Byrne. I'm happy to waive my right of reply.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll now put the Porteous Lockie recommendation. All those in favour, please raise your hands and keep them raised. That's Councillors Hesse, Stamoulis, Steer, Macri, York, Iskander, McKenna, Racidi, De Cruz, Lockie, Kiat, Porteous and Drury. And Councillor Passos is against, so that is carried 14-1. Next item, Sydney Gateway. Councillor De Cruz.
This is Councillor Steer's motion.
Councillor Steer, my mistake. Please proceed.
Although I hope Councillor De Cruz will second it. Yes, this is quite a simple motion. We did have an extensive report on it when we discussed this matter back on the 25th of February, but we haven't had any follow-up since then. And there are a number of issues that we need to know, particularly as we've just passed the Tempe management lands motion as well. I've left the motion quite open-ended as to when the report should be produced and pretty much what it should say, except in relation to the budget. So it's not at all in conflict with the officer's comments. Part of it can be put in the budget when we know about the investments that can be reported to council at the appropriate time. I don't want to amend this motion to say when these things should happen because it's already been flagged by the officer that we will be getting a response in the budget, at least on the effect in the budget. And so I really think that it would be of value to councillors that they would be able to listen to find out what is going on and to be confident in what is going on and that the terms of the motion on the 25th of February are being fulfilled. So I'm asking everyone to vote for it. Thank you. I've finished.
Sorry, councillors, is there a seconder for the motion?
Yes, I'll second it.
You wish to speak to it?
Just briefly, that this is quite a big change for council, and a significant issue was the investment of the funds, because this was a revenue stream for council from this property, and that it was recommended by staff that by officers that the money be invested soundly so that we can continue to have a good stream of revenue. So I think it's really important that councillors are informed about what potential investments can be done before the officers go too far down the track of developing a strategy. We'd just like some kind of outline of the kinds of investments that council can make, because I believe that there are restrictions on what councils can do. So we just like some guidance on the kinds of projects and I guess, yeah, just what kind of things councils can be permitted to invest in. It may be a very good time to invest with the downturn in the economy. So yeah, if we can get some background on, yeah, just what investments council can make with the proceeds from this acquisition. So thanks for that, and I thank Councillor Steer for bringing this motion to council.
While I don't have the business papers before me, my recollection is that the officer's comment is that this would be addressed through the budget process. I might just pose that as a question to the Chief Executive or the relevant officer about when this would be not reported in the normal course of events.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is a substantial issue which will be considered both in the budget report back to councillors and more generally because there are significant issues associated with this sum of money.
Right. Okay, well, I think we're actually all in accordance here. We've already resolved previously that we will get a report on this. The Chief Executive is reporting that that will definitely occur, and we've got a resolution that we receive a report with no specific timeline. So I suppose you could say that's consensus. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion? Okay, if not, I'll put that. All those in favour, please raise your hands. So in support, I have councillors Hesse, Stamoulis, Steer, Macri, York, Iskander, McKenna, Passis, Racidi, De Cruz, Kiat, Drury, Lockie, Porteous, and myself. That is unanimous. Now, we're due now to go into Committee of the Whole, councillors, or confidential session. Mr. Naylor, would you mind explaining to councillors what the process will be from here? This is the first time we've ever done this via teleconference.
Through the chair, councillors, the issue with the Zoom meeting platform is the live stream, the audio to the live stream on our website cannot be cut. So I propose to the Mayor today that what we do whenever we go into confidential session is we have a 2-minute adjournment so we can share on the live screen that council is about to go into confidential session, and the meeting, the broadcast will be concluding to give members of public who are watching notice that we've now concluded the open session of council and we're going into confidential, which we can't live stream, and therefore, because we can't pause the audio on the live stream, we have to cut the live stream.
Order. Just because we've got two urgent motions, which I know the public are going to want to hear. I'm just a bit concerned that if that happens, we won't be able to, that won't be live streamed. Could we amend the order of business to bring forward the two urgent items and deal with them first and then move into confidential session?
I'll put that as a process question to Mr. Naylor.
Through the chair, you could move that way, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, well, unless there's an alternative path for us to switch the stream back on, the broadcast back on subsequently, it seems like that would be the best way forward. So Councillor Porteous is moving a suspension of standing orders to deal with the two urgent items that have been tabled. The first of which is from Councillor Steer and has been circulated to councillors. Councillor Steer, I'm of a mind to rule that it is urgent. Would you like to speak firstly to why the matter is urgent?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much, Mayor. This motion is urgent because the situation is urgent. What we have here is the Minister for Planning using planning powers, using legislation to take power for himself, not just in relation to the pandemic situation that we have now, but for a period of 6 to 12 months, starting from now. The legislation has already been enacted so that he is now able to do this now. What this means is he's taking power away from councils to make decisions about DAs. He's taking it away from the IHAPs, and he's taking it away from the regional planning panels. These are all put in place by the state government to govern DAs, to govern developments, and to ensure that developments suit the areas where they're put and that they meet the needs of the residents. We've seen many times what has happened when government gets involved. We get flammable cladding, we get apartments with cracks that can't be explained, we get overcrowding, we get a massive reduction in open space, and we get decisions that are made for the benefit of developers and not for the benefit of residents. When this came in, it was said that this would enable the Minister for Planning to create field hospitals to deal with the pandemic. We know that field hospitals to deal with the pandemic are not necessary because the other measures put in place to deal with the pandemic are working, and pressure is not being put unduly on the health system. The pandemic is being used as an excuse to increase the powers of the Minister for Planning to, in fact, make him a dictator so that he can make any decision he wants without regard to the residents, without regard to the local area, and without regard to the people's needs. It will create a massive impact because it will increase construction. This will impact people's amenity of life by increasing noise, by increasing dust, by increasing dirt. We've already seen with WestConnex and Sydney Metro how those developments impact on people's lives, and it does not mean that we will get sensible planning decisions that will enable us to have the communities that we want. We know very clearly what kind of communities we want. We want clean, green, open spaces. We want people to be friendly to each other, people to feel free to walk around, to exercise, to communicate with each other, and to enjoy living in their area, to have enough space, both internally in their homes and externally in parks. And with this power, all of that will be taken away from us. So I urge everyone to vote for this motion. Thank you. And thank you, Mayor, for ruling it urgent.
Okay, thank you. I will rule that that is urgent. Councillors will need to vote on that. Does anyone wish to speak against it being dealt with urgently? If not, I'll put that. All those.
Councillor Passos, I would like to speak against it.
Yes, Councillor Passos.
I don't think it's urgent in this climate, what we have at the moment. Not urgent at all. The Minister is looking forward to the future of people that were employed, which their jobs are probably no longer going to be there. This will increase employment and cut red tape, and for what we're all going through at this moment. This is going to create jobs, and it's going to create shelter for people. And to say that we want people to be friendly with each other, I can't see what the Minister and the government's proposing is telling people to go out and punch each other in the face. This is absolutely ridiculous. You cannot fault the state and federal Liberal Party for what they've done in this crisis. And now to try and play politics is absolutely ridiculous when 10 people have just died in a nursing home and we're playing our little game of politics here tonight. Somebody's mother, somebody's grandmother. And what he wants to do is get New South Wales working again, employing people, and we spend time calling it urgent. Please.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Passos. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. I have Councillors Hesse, Stamoulis, Steer. Councillor Macri is against. No, he's in favour. Councillors York, McKenna. Can't see Councillor Racidi. Councillor De Cruz in support. Councillor Kiat in support. Councillor Drury. Councillors Lockie, Porteous, Iskander and myself all in support. with councillors Passos and Rossetti against, that has been carried. Okay, now councillor Steer, you've really already spoken to the matter. You didn't limit yourself to urgency, but that's okay. So, councillor Porteous, do you wish to speak to the motion as a seconder?
Look, just briefly, councillor Byrne. I think it's really important, not just obviously that we're advocating against this really appalling abuse of power that the Minister for Planning has enabled himself to take, but also just what that means locally for us. I'm really concerned to understand within the Inner West Council local government area what that means in terms of current DAs or DAs that are coming up, because we know that the Treasurer actually wrote to Urban Task Force and asked which of the projects they could identify as ones that they could fast track, which were, you know, ready, shovel ready, I think the terminology they used. And we know that within the response that was sent to the Treasurer, there were about 7 of those projects which are within our LGA, and who knows which other ones might be considered as well. I mean, you know, this is an absolute overreach of planning powers by the Minister, and it's really taking advantage of a moment when people's attention, council's attention, everybody's attention is elsewhere, because we're all, you know, very concerned about COVID and our fellow citizens, and trying to get through a really difficult moment together with as much caring and compassion and as we can. We're not really focused on developers taking advantage of that moment and exploiting it in order to get through development proposals which have been fought against for a long time by the community. So I think particularly for me, the second part of the motion, where we get a report coming to council as soon as possible, which outlines which where those areas of vulnerability might be in our own community and within our own council area, I think will be really essential as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for that, councillor, and thank you to both councillor Steer and councillor Porteous for bringing this to our attention. Is there any councillor who wishes to amend the motion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, councillor Stamos.
I'd certainly like to support this motion. I think to me it typifies a lack of focus by state government. We're in the middle of a major economic downturn that could last for an extended period of time, with the focus really being on the basics, things like our bars, our pubs, our coffee shops, arts and culture, sports, tourism, entertainment. And then, of course, a lot of community life is being affected. You know, access to our pools, access to our libraries, the basic things that we do in a community are changing. And I think this is a bit of a misfire from our state government on one particular industry. Obviously, that industry is right into the ear of the ministers and the Premier, but this is a different sort of crisis that we're facing at the moment, and it is impacting very much on our local businesses, our local life, and those industries that are not the building industry are being very, very much impacted by the coronavirus crisis. Now, if we're in a different sort of economic situation, then yes, of course, government wants to stimulate the business, the building industry, to try and create jobs and the onflow from that. But we aren't in that situation. We're in a situation where it is these smaller industries being impacted, and this motion sends, I think, that key message through that we're not supporting this, and in fact, I think it's a misfire. Thank you.
Mayor, may I speak? Mayor?
Just one moment, councillor Drury. Councillors, I'll just note that we also need to go back and adopt the minutes of the previous meeting in addition to dealing with these urgency motions. Councillor Drury?
Mayor, I wholeheartedly support the motion. I do not support Councillor Stamlos's tin hat conspiracy theories, nor do I support some of the more extreme comments made, I think, in moving the motion. notwithstanding that, I do think this is an overreach by the state government. I think that it has potentially very serious consequences for our community. I think that we should express the view, as in point one, overreach, and secondly, we should get some analysis from our staff in relation to it.
You're on mute, Darcy.
Sorry, I'm getting slack. Further discussion, councillors?
Yeah, I'd just like to say a couple of things.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure why the minister is taking these powers on. If it's for the reasons that, you know, they needed field hospitals and approval to change buildings, because I know a lot of that work is going on in preparing for the coronavirus. And I don't share the view that we're over the hill at the moment with the virus and what it's going to be, because all the projections point to the peak when we'll be over it. They're talking about peaks in July and November. That's the data that they have based on the overseas experience. So that's fine. I'll support the motion, but as Councillor Jury said, without the rhetoric. So I always believe that planning powers should be at the local level with us. And I never approve the state government taking our planning powers away. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillor. Is there anyone who wishes to amend the motion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Steer for her right of reply.
I don't think there's much left to say on this one. I thank Councillor Macri and Councillor Drury for their comments. I do agree with Councillor Macri that local decisions are the best decisions, and that councillors locally and people locally, the residents, I have great faith in the people, are the best place to make decisions about what kind of developments they want and what kind of place they want to live in and how that should look. So all I'm going to say is I commend this motion to you all. If you support local decision making and local residents, then I think we need to send a clear message to the minister that he should think long and hard about exactly how he will exercise these powers and for how long. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, councillor. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands and keep them raised. In support, I have councillors Hesse, Stamoulis, Macri, York, McKenna. Councillor Passis, are you in support? No. Councillor Rosidi is against. Councillor De Cruz, Councillor Kiat, Councillor Drury, Councillor Lockie, Councillor Porteous, Councillor Iskander, Councillor Steer and myself are in support. So that's carried 13-2 with councillors Rosidi and Passis against. Next urgency item is that tabled by Councillor McKenna and Councillor Rosidi in regards to the proposed changes to WestConnex. Councillor McKenna, it is similarly my intention to rule that this is urgent, but did you wish to speak briefly to why it is urgent?
It is urgent. 1 minute, get my unmute. I've unmuted. It is urgent, Mr. Mayor. This arrived in people's letterboxes in the last couple of days. A couple of days before that, I received it. Some of it on email. Submissions have to be in by the 24th of May. That's just a little over 3 weeks away. It's important that we get this information out to the community and the community know that we're supporting them in responding, in our opposition of responding to this incredibly challenging proposal by the Transport for New South Wales. You got it, Darcy?
Sorry about that. Councillor Passis, do you wish to speak against the matter being considered urgent?
No.
Okay. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the matter being considered urgent? If not, I'm going to take that as an indication that there is unanimous support for it being dealt with urgently. So I'll put that and declare that carried unanimously. Is there anyone who disagrees with that count? If not, I will now go to Councillor.
May I speak?
Hold on a moment. Councillor McKenna, do you wish to speak to the substance of the motion as the mover?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, please.
Councillor
Yes.
McKenna, please proceed.
Well, this is continuing the nightmare that we've been living for some number of years. I think it's now up to about 7. You might recall that during the proposal for the tunnel and during the conditions of consent, the government agreed to look at the impact on the community 12 months after the tunnel opened. That time is August of September this year. And out of the blue, a few days ago, we received this proposal to make major changes to many of our areas, which will increase the rat running in a lot of areas. It creates great difficulty for local people to be able to get around their own area. It means that just quickly in the Haberfield area, access from Parramatta Road into Haberfield is going to be removed. You will not be able to get into Haberfield from Parramatta Road at all. There'll be no right-hand turns. That will mean Sloane Street as the only crossroad, and it's a local road. It's already heavily impacted by bank ups of traffic. We've also got the new ambulance station in that site, which creates further problems for that area. We then have on the Waratah Street end of Haberfield, the removal of the lights, no opportunity for people in Haberfield to get onto the City West Link. So they're literally an island. To get anywhere, they're going to have to go way up through Five Dock or through Leichhardt. Just crazy. The other area that is just a disaster is the Leichhardt area, the James Street lights there, the removal of parking on many of the streets, James Street, William Street, Norton Street, the removal of trees on those streets, the making of James Street one way, a street which has very few, most of the houses have no off-street parking, removing all the parking from that street, making their lives almost unlivable. The intersection is proposed is so huge. I already find that intersection intimidating. It is so large already. It's going to be twice as large, probably one of the biggest intersections you've ever seen. It's just an absolutely crazy situation. And the situation, removing the making William Street a thoroughfare that's going to have huge amount of traffic, a local road. It is just not acceptable that local roads are continuing to be made into thoroughfares, taking masses of traffic just to speed up the City West Link and Parramatta Road. And my time's up. I think I've said as much as I can in that short time, and thank you. Unmute, Dusty.
Sorry. Councillor Rossetti, do you wish to speak to the matter as the seconder?
Just to quickly say thank you, Mayor, for putting this up, and Councillor McKenna, and hope that everyone supports it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor. Now I had Councillor Passis wanting to speak to the resolution.
To do is see if Tempe can engage some expert traffic consultants on this. I'm not taking away the professionalism of our traffic officers, but we need to be able to address this, and as I stated previously, not with public meetings and not political games. We need to be able to stand up against this with professional advice and people that know how to deal with this type of thing. Public meetings and motions going up is not the way to go about this. It's only playing games. By letting them know that we mean business, that this is the only way to go. regardless of the cost. And I have to also state, it's a bit of the fault of the previous Ashfield Council, because at one stage when this proposal, WestConnex, was being bandied about and debated, they wanted these suburbs closed off. They said they didn't want anybody coming through. They wanted, and I recall this vividly, when I said you are trying to dissect the municipality. So this proposal has come from somewhere, and we have to tell them they're wrong. So I move with councillors, if they would support this, that we get some expert traffic consultants on this case.
I'll just go to the Chief Executive to get some advice about that. I'll put that as a question. Will there be external advice sought on this matter?
We've already got the report.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. There are a couple of issues here substantively underneath this, which Councillor Lockie, Councillor Porteous and I have been discussing with Councillor McKenna. First, there is no other options provided in the assessment. They've simply said, here's the answer, without necessarily outlining all of the problem. They have not provided any real data about how they've reached that particular option, and nor have they given us the basis for collecting that data. If it's, for example, traffic surveys, they're notoriously unreliable. We are seeking advice about how to deal with that. If we need external consultants, we will use them, but at the moment we're using our own internal experts. And simply remind councillors, all of these issues were raised when WestConnex was first proposed, both by the relevant local councils, by groups like Infrastructure Australia and others, and all of the stories at the time are coming home to roost. So we intend to intensify a campaign in this area, and in direct response to Councillor Passis, if we need external advice, we will use it. But unless we get the data and the basis for that data, then there's little for them to work upon, and we will be making that an issue as well.
Well, can I move an amendment that we write to the Minister or the Premier as a matter of urgency, and saying that we're not being afforded respect and we're not getting the advice we need?
Well, I'm sorry, Councillor Passis. The motion itself, the first line of it reads, that Council write to the Premier of New South Wales and relevant ministers expressing our total opposition to the proposal, etc. So I think we're all in furious agreement here, really. And
it's not just the proposal that we object to. We object to that they are not getting back to us. They're ignoring us.
Well, Councillor Passis, I suggest that yourself or Councillor Rossetti might have more luck in that regard than myself or even the Chief Executive. It's not for a lack of letters that we've sent to state government ministers that we don't get enough replies.
Mr. Mayor, when you want to send a letter, it seems okay, and I've noticed that we do get replies.
We're writing a letter in this regard, Councillor Passis. That's the motion, that we write a letter. So do you have a further amendment?
Yes, I will amend that we blockade any WestConnex equipment that's working in this area at the moment if they're not taking notice of us.
I'll support that.
With the view, we have to do this because we are being ignored. If we are being ignored.
Yeah. Councillor, you've already spoken to the motion, so I'm going to rule out of order a blockade, but you could certainly go back and look at the history of the former 3 constituent councils, and there's been things like that undertaken in the past, so I invite you to submit a notice of motion in that regard.
No, Mr. Mayor, we paid people to blockade. The people that were jumping up and down weren't going enough to stand in front of the things.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'm going to move on with dealing with the motion. I'll go to Councillor McKenna for a right of reply.
No, Chair, can I just say something?
Yeah.
Chair, I looked at the proposal as it is on the net. I was a bit disappointed that I had to get that information off the net through a resident. I mean, why aren't we as councillors advised of this up front?
That's right. Yeah.
Because it is a serious thing, and I've looked at it, and the actual presentations, it's quite well done. Doesn't pull any punches. If you get on the website, it takes you through each intersection, you look at it and you see the impact associated with it. And it is disappointing that they're going down this path. But on the books, we've already got support for something that can bring that undone. And we were supposed to move forward with the work on Chandos Street to actually stop the left-hand turn. Now, when we had IKEA coming in and people thought it was the end of the world down in Tempe, what we did, we went for an extensive program of stopping streets being able to be turned into from the Princess Highway. Why can't we go for a program like that, be proactive? We control our local streets. Why are we relying on them to actually let our streets be used? That is the proactive approach. You've got the first on the books. It's already been supported by council, Chandos Street, and start working your way through with left-hand turns. Systematically make it so it works for our residents, not so it works for them. That is the positive forward step we should be taking now. And, you know, I don't agree with blockading and all that stuff, but or rhetoric or meetings. We should progress what we need to progress for our residents. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any further discussion, councillors? There's no further discussion. I go to Councillor.
Yes.
Who's that?
Who was it? Rochelle.
I was just going to thank Councillor Councillor McKenna for bringing this motion to council.
Bad luck, they didn't put you on the motion.
Councillor Porteous.
Yeah, just a few things. One, I think that we should be seeking a briefing of councillors on this. So I'd like to maybe ask that we add that as an additional amendment. And two, that we just clarify that council makes a submission on this and seeks expertise as required, just picking up on Councillor Passis's points. And the final point was, we don't actually have it says requests an extension. I think it should read an extension rather than an extension. Request an extension of the exhibition period. I think it would be good to specify until when. So I'd suggest that we seek an extension until, say, June 15th, which would give us approximately another month, which would be a more reasonable period of time, particularly in terms of COVID, where it's difficult to communicate and to consult. So I suggest those as amendments.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor McKenna, are you amenable to including those amendments from Councillor Porteous?
Yes.
Sound.
Can I finish?
Sorry, did I cut you off, Councillor McKenna?
Well, I wasn't sure whether I was able to continue because I'll close debate. Is that okay? Yes.
No, just hold on a moment. I'm not sure if we've got other contributors, but Councillor Porteous is proposing 2 amendments. Do you wish to incorporate those?
Yes, I'm happy to support them.
Okay,
yes.
They're incorporated. Is there any further?
3 with the time period to the June 15th as well?
Yes.
Yeah, they're both incorporated. Councillor Porteous, do you wish to speak further?
Just there's 3. So 1 is a briefing for councillors, 2 is a submission seeking expertise where required, and 3 is adding the date for the exhibition through to the June the 15th.
Councillor McKenna, are you willing to incorporate those 3?
Yes, yes.
Okay, they're incorporated. Councillor Porteous, do you wish to speak to the matter?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to speak against the resolution or to amend it? If not, I'll go to Councillor McKenna for her right of reply.
Thank you very much. During my speech, I didn't actually comment on the fact that we do have a comprehensive report. That report was commissioned some couple of years ago, and it's been given to the Department of Transport, and of course they haven't acted on it. But it is there. It actually covers all of these issues, and the issues that Councillor Macri raised are covered in that report, how we would manage the rat running once this tunnel opened. The issue is that the Transport for New South Wales has not gone through the process that they said they would. We are in this dreadful situation now, and despite what Councillor Passes says, we never wanted to be an island. Haberfield never wanted to be cut off, but what they're proposing is absolutely ludicrous. For instance, in Boomerang, in Dalhousie Street, they're proposing to remove the signage that they put up less than a year ago. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work, and now they're proposing to undo it. It is quite crazy that the area is being subjected to this after what they've been through over recent years, and it with no advantage for the local community at all. All the advantage goes with the with making the progress of the major motorways faster at the expense of the local community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. I've got councillors Hesse, Stamoulis, Macri, York, McKenna, Passis, Raciti, De Cruz, Kiat, Drury, Lockie, Iskander, Steer, Porteous, and myself. That is carried unanimously. That brings us to the adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anyone have any clarifications or corrections? I hope not, because good luck to us doing that by teleconference. Does anyone have any amendments? If not, I'll move the adoption of the minutes. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Porteous will second that. All those in favour?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Right, Councillor Porteous.
I would like, can you hear me?
I can.
I would like to know, the General Manager took on a lot of questions on notice on the previous meetings, and he said he'd get back to us. A lot of issues were taken on notice, and we haven't heard one of the replies to them or answers.
Councillor Passis, we're dealing with the adoption of the minutes. Did you have an amendment or a clarification?
No, but the minutes should show information that the General Manager was going to get back to certain councillors on, and they don't show it. It seems to have gone up into Never Never Land.
Okay, thank you. I'll seek clarification from the Manager of Governance about that. Mr. Naylor, is a record made in the minutes of the questions that have been tabled by councillors and the response provided in meetings to them?
Through the chair, we're not required under the Code of Meeting Practice to include questions in the minutes. The minutes are a record of the decisions taken at council. The Code of Meeting Practice talks about questions that people, that staff and councillors can take things on notice or have sufficient notice of questions being asked of them before providing a response.
No, this was information that the General Manager was not aware of, and he said he will find that out for us and get back to us. It's to do with all different issues, and they never, never comes back.
Thank you, Councillor Passis. I think you'll need to follow up with the General Manager directly about any specific questions that you don't think have been answered, but we can't deal with that through this motion, which is simply for the adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting. So I'll put that. All those in favour, please raise your hands. I'm going to presume that that's unanimous. Is there any councillor against the motion? That has been carried unanimously, which brings us to Committee of the Whole. So, Mr. Naylor, if you could just remind us of the process.
Sorry, Darcy, can I raise a point of order?
Yes.
I did foreshadow earlier that I'm not going to vote to enter into confidential session in relation to item 12, which I was just looking. It's not actually. It's in the contents of this meeting notice, but it's not. There's no actual item reported, as far as I can see in the papers, apart from the confidential papers. But in any case, the usual practice would be that we would need to make a decision to move into confidential session. I actually don't. Sorry?
That's correct. We'd need to resolve to move into confidential session.
What is
So-
item 12? What is item 12?
In relation to Tempe Reserve, Councillor. Councillor Kiat, what's your point of order?
So just before we move to stop the feed on the meeting, etc., I'd like to actually have a debate about whether we enter into confidential session in relation to that item in particular.
Well, I'll just seek advice from the Manager of Governance about this. So we've been provided a report which is commercial in confidence and which has been tabled for discussion in confidential session, Mr. Naylor. Are councillors able to overturn the advice from Council's legal officer that the matter needs to be considered in confidential session?
Through the chair, it's not a matter to debate. You vote to go into confidential session to consider the confidential matters, or you vote against not going into confidential session. You can discuss, if you feel you can discuss it without disclose any confidential information, do it in the open meeting. But we would recommend that you move into confidential session to discuss all the confidential items, as is the usual practice.
I have no details.
Sorry, Councillor Passos, I'll call the meeting to order.
I have no details.
Sorry, Councillor Passos, I'll call the meeting to order or I'll adjourn the meeting. Councillor Kiat, I'm going to suggest that we do go into confidential session. It will be free. You'll be free to move a motion when we get to that item, that it be deferred and dealt with in open council at the subsequent meeting, which would achieve your objective rather than us having a separate debate now about whether we go into confidential session at all. I assume you're not disputing that we do need to deal with the other two matters in confidential session.
Mr. Mayor, I
Yeah,
have
we
no
can deal with it that way.
paperwork on any confidential matters. I have no information on any confidential matters that you're talking about now.
Councillor Passos, with the circulation of the business papers,
Yes.
a week ago, there was an attachment to the email from Catherine notifying us that the business papers were available online. The attachment contains the confidential reports.
Well, I don't have them.
Well, there's not much I can do about that.
I cannot participate. There is no way that if it's so serious that it has to be confidential, I'm denied the right to read anything that we're supposed to be discussing.
Okay, well, Councillor Passos, I understand that it's frustrating.
I would like that recorded, that
It
whatever
has to
you discussed tonight has not been discussed in the proper manner.
No, well,
Because the
Councillor-
computer, I could not access the computer, and it wasn't because I don't know what I'm doing.
Okay, Councillor Passos, would you like us to get on with the rest of the meeting, or will I need to adjourn the meeting? I understand your situation.
I
but
would like, so you are denying me the right to know what you're going into closed committee for?
No, there's 3 items that are listed and you've been notified as per the local government.
No,
Act.
I have not. Come and look at my phone and come and look at the computer.
I'll adjourn the
And if
meeting.
you can find that I've been notified, I will apologise.
The meeting is adjourned.
Can I just check if anyone's listening?
Yes, listening.
Is Darcy, no disrespect, has he actually adjourned the meeting for the night?
No. Just to stop that barrage.
Okay, I was unclear. Sorry, I just wasn't sure. So
No.
we've basically got a 5-minute adjournment, yeah?
Just a 2 or 5 minute, max 5, I'd say.
Okay, thanks, Lucille. Good
Well,
on.
we were told we had to adjourn to go into
No, I get that. It was just-
session anyway, because we have to go off
Oh, yeah.
YouTube.
Yep. Gotcha. Thanks, Liz.
You would understand that better than me.
Only marginally. I wouldn't think of it.
I just sent him a text message. I said, he's got the patience of Job.
Councillor McKenna, just we're still live streaming, just so you know.
Okay, we'll resume the meeting. We'll just make sure that there's a quorum of councillors who are back online. There clearly seems to be. So we were up to determining whether we would resolve to go into confidential session. Is there a motion to go into confidential session? Moved by councillor Macri. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by councillor Drury. I'll put that. Is there any councillor against going into confidential session? No, that has been carried unanimously then. Is there any councillor who disagrees with that verdict? Verdict, count, determination?
Yes,
No.
I'm against going into confidential session.
Okay, councillor Kiat is voting against going into confidential session. So that has been carried 14-1.
No, I go along with that.
13-2, councillors Passis and Kiat against.
Can I get a clarification, Councillor Byrne?
Yeah.
Sorry, I understood previously that we could vote when we got to item 12 not to deal with it in confidential session. So if we can't do that, I would also not vote to go into confidential session.
I've proposed that we're going into confidential session, at which point it will be open to any councillor to move that item not be dealt with in confidential session and be deferred to next week. So it's a pretty minor procedural matter, but as to whether we voted on that now, what Councillor Kiat was proposing before was that we not go into confidential session at all. So I think there's been a vote carried to go into confidential session, and we'll get to item 12. It's not the first item in confidential session, it's the last one. So there can be a discussion then about whether to defer the matter and deal with it in open council at the next meeting. So we're now up to the Balmain Leagues Club site, item 10. But Mr. Naylor, do you need the 2-minute deferment now in order to cut off the broadcast?
Through the chair, yes, that would be great. We're just putting that up now.
We'll just adjourn for a couple of minutes.